What's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Alright, so we are going to do a full story video. A full story video is when I sit down and take a bunch of my older videos and put them together into one big video. Today's full story video is going to be Operation Zero Tolerance. Now, we had covered the entire event. Here's the thing, because there were a lot of issues when it came to our coverage over Operation Zero Tolerance. Now, when I say issues, I don't mean like problems. I mean issues like all the different books that took part in the actual event. Now, with that being said, we might see me repeat some things over and over again because, again, it was multiple videos I did and put these videos together into one big video. So if you hear me say some things like 5-6 times, I'm sorry. It's just that each video I did try my best to re-explain a few things that were going on when it came to the entire event involving all the different members of the X family. But with that being said, guys, here is Operation Zero Tolerance, the full story video. Okay, so it's technically time for us to begin our coverage over Operation Zero Tolerance with the idea of Generation X issues number 26 and 27. Now, for me personally, this is a prelude, but also kind of like an epilogue to our last video when it came to Generation X. And let me explain, because when it came to the last video we did for our young heroes and also Banshee and Emma Frost, they were attacked by, well, Black Tom. And so by the end of that storyline, when you did have Penance and also Banshee being able to defeat Black Tom, the question was then, where are the students? Where did Black Tom take them? Now, when it comes to Jubilee, she's not with the rest of the students, but also the fact, is Emma Frost okay? Is she actually alive or not? And so as we get into the opening pages of the storyline, we're really picking up with our young heroes right now just floating out there in the middle of the ocean, not knowing how far they are away from land. And you also have Monet and also Chambers trying their best to help out the other students right now who could possibly die for different types of injuries. But it's Monet pointing out the fact that with their powers combined, they have the ability to take down an entire country. But the problem is right now, they're right now out in the middle of the ocean. She has no idea if they'll be able to actually survive at the moment. And so we do kind of get a small check-in when it comes to Banshee and Emma Frost, because in our last video for these two characters, Banshee had no choice but to use his powers on her. And so we're kind of left to believe in the possibility that Emma Frost is dead. And it's him right now just laying her on this table kind of like, okay, she's gone. But the thing is, I'm promising her right now, I'm going to bring home our students. And so that's his main goal at the moment. Now, in our last few X-Men videos, we have been constantly reminded about the idea that Bastion has Jubilee, but also the fact that when it came to our last video for Generation X, we saw Bastion being able to grab Jubilee. And so is her right now still with him? Now, is her believing that it's Bastion allowing her to escape? But in reality, it's just him kind of studying her, learning more about her. And so for Jubilee's mindset, she believes at the moment that she's trying to escape. And matter of fact, she does take out one guard who's kind of begging to survive. And really for Jubilee, she could leave him there so that she'll then be able to escape. But she's like, you know what? That's wrong with me. Let me try to help you out. Now, for Bastion, he realized that this is a mutant who's trying to help out a human. And when it comes to Bastion, he believes that all mutants are evil. All mutants are a menace to society. As we switch back over to the students, you have them trying their best to, well, help out Skin at the moment. And the reason why, because he's no longer really able to control his skin, but on top of that, the sun is burning him. And so you have Monet and Chamber trying their best to hold his skin together, but the problem is it still constantly hurts him. And so you didn't have Chamber blast off part of the raft to cover up Skin to block the sun. The problem is that the raft begins to fall apart more piece by piece. And so for Monet, she begins to freak out a tad bit more. And she says, hey, listen, I can fly. Let me go ahead and fly, hopefully, in one direction to see how far we are from land to hopefully get some type of help. And so now we can switch back over to Jubilee. Now for Jubilee, it's her being able to help out one of those attackers that attacked her earlier when she was trying to escape. But once you do have Jubilee being able to help him out, he still calls her a filthy mutant, calls her a horrible name, but for Jubilee, she knows that what comes with the territory of being a mutant. Even though you're being helpful, they still hate you for what you are. Either way, for Jubilee, it's time for her to get the heck out of there. Now, while she's trying to do that, Bastion is still watching her very closely. Now, we do get a little update on Emma Frost. She's not dead. Matter of fact, she does wake up, but we also get a reminder that when it came to one of our prior videos, she was visited by, well, Nightmare. And when it came to Nightmare, he warned her like, hey, things gonna pop off for you very soon and the rest of your students as well. And technically he was correct. The whole idea of Black Tom. The problem is that we're still not done yet because we also got Operation Zero Tolerance around the corner for our young mutants. And speaking of our young mutants, when we switch back over to them, you have Monet get sent right back to where they were at, except she lands in the water. And so you have Sync go out of his way to go save her life. I just realized this entire storyline so far, we have barely heard of Sync. But either way, when it comes to Sync, he does save her life. But Monet said she saw what's out there. She saw the truth. And the thing is, they're going to die. And so when we switch over to Banshee, it's him right now trying to locate the young mutants. But the problem is his computer is not really able to find them. Now for Banshee, he does get some good news. Emma Frost is alive and well. She's able to walk in there and be like, hey, Banshee, I'm okay technically, I'm all good, but now it's time for you and I to work together to figure out where the heck are the students. But as we close on the final pages of this chapter, we do pick up with Jubilee being able to make it outside the base that Bastion's currently using where he has Zarette. The problem is that as soon as she gets outside, she's taken back inside by Bastion. Like, she was not going to get that far at all, especially when it came to the weather around the base as well. And so as we enter the next chapter, we're really getting into the idea of Bastion trying to locate where the X-Men are at by, of course, going through Jubilee. And so what he's trying to do is trying to access her mind. Look through her mind to hopefully find a way to locate the X-Men. But he's trying to use different types of emotions or different types of ways to upset her to begin the process of going into her mind to figure out where the X-Men could possibly be at. Because we see Jubilee right now just hooked up to all these different devices. Now, with all that being said, when it comes to Bastion, he tells her like, hey, Scott Summers, Cyclops, he's dead. Matter of fact, here is his visor. It's broken because I killed off Scott Summers. Now, we already know that's not true at all. But for Jubilee, she does not know that. But at the same time, she knows there's no way that Cyclops is dead. Now, with her being hooked up to all those devices, we begin to see the machine go into her mind, where you do have Jubilee replay a moment in time when it came to the death of Illyana. She was the younger sister to Colossus, who was killed off by the legacy virus. Now, in this flashback, we see her right now at the funeral of Illyana, but also being confronted by Cyclops. Now, for Jubilee, it's really more her being concerned for Logan, because for Logan, he showed no emotion. Like, he didn't cry, wasn't sad, but for the rest of the X-Men, they were all sad and crying over the idea of Illyana. Now, for Cyclops, he tells Jubilee, like, no. When it comes to Logan, that dude is a big teddy bear. He may not show it, but the dude does have feelings. He's very sad about the idea of what happened to Illyana. But now we have to switch over to Banshee and also Emma Frost. Now, when we do, it's really more Emma Frost trying to go into the mind of Banshee. And the reason why, because she wants to see if Black Tom had said anything to Banshee in the previous storyline that could help Banshee remember anything special of where Black Tom could be keeping the students at. And the thing is, we get a small glimpse, and for me personally, a small glimpse of a good old storyline, Giant Size X-Men #1. But once you have Banshee kind of remember that day, he's like, oh my God, Black Tom has them there. We're not told where, but you do have Banshee just get up and leave without Emma Frost and Pennis. And so as we switch back over to Bastion and also Jubilee, you have Bastion continuing to play mind games on Jubilee, hoping to get that information that he is truly looking for. And so when it comes to Bastion, he tells Jubilee like, hey, so you know, I killed Dolph Bishop as well. Now for Jubilee, she does not believe in the idea the man had killed Dolph Bishop. But also let's not forget, when it came to Jubilee meeting Bishop for the first time, it was Bishop telling Jubilee that she'll be the last X-Man. And so when it comes to Jubilee, once she begins to remember that moment in time, you then have that moment in time play on Bastion's computer. Now you also have Bastion continue to play more mind games on Jubilee by saying like, hey, I didn't kill off all the X-Men. I only said Cyclops and Bishop. And then he tried to show her this image of him of not really killing Wolverine yet. Because for Bastion, he kind of realized that, okay, for Jubilee, she truly cares a lot for this Logan guy. Let's show her that we have Logan, that we are torturing him. But in reality, he does not have Logan at all. And for Jubilee, she learns very quickly that this man does not have Logan at all, because you have this fake Logan image begin to beg for his life. And for Jubilee, she knows that's not Logan at all. Logan does not beg for his life at all. That right there is a fake image. She realized a long time ago that what Bastion was trying to do, trying to use her as a way to learn everything about the X-Men. And so with all that being said, when it comes to Jubilee, she begins to call the man out for what he's trying to achieve, that he believes that mutants should be killed off, that the earth should only be for humans. But here's the thing, because while she's calling him out, he's getting upset. But the same tech that was used on Jubilee is right now working on Bastion. Those computer screens are beginning to show his origin. The problem is we don't learn much from it. All we see is this pink puddle. This machine hand pops up, but then all this pink skin grasps on the actual arm, the machine arm that appears on the screen. And then we see Bastion. So we're kind of left to wonder, is Bastion a real person or possibly just a computer, some kind of machine? Either way, Bastion walks out of the room, stopping us from learning about the origin of him. And this leads into Operation Zero Tolerance, because as he walks out, he tells his folks like, hey, I need you guys to go after the X-Men who are currently in Hong Kong. And the thing is, our last X-Men video, when it came to ones on Earth, they were leaving Hong Kong after working with Shang-Chi. But now apparently they're being pulled into Operation Zero Tolerance. So our next video, we begin our coverage over it. With that being said, okay, so man, guys, I am hyped to actually sit down and cover Operation Zero Tolerance. Now, here's the thing, because we're covering a couple of issues in the beginning of the actual crossover. Is Wolverine, X-Force, X-Men, Generation X, like all these different books are coming together for this crossover. Now, there's no X-Factor and there's no Excalibur once again. I realize they have done Excalibur dirty when it came to these X-Men crossovers in the 1990s. But anyway, so when it comes to Operation Zero Tolerance, the first chapter, X-Men issue number 65, it does pick up literally where our last video had left off at. Now, here's the thing though, because technically this issue is more of a prologue, but for me, everything just sets off with this issue right here. Like, it's Bastion saying, okay, it's now time for me to handle the mutant situation. But here's the thing, because the first few pages, we don't really get the chance to see Operation Zero Tolerance. Instead, we see Jean Grey right now being confronted by Iron Man. Now, when it comes to Operation Zero Tolerance, it does pick up 1997. In that year, Iron Man, the Avengers, the Fantastic Four, they were still in the Heroes Reborn reality. And so for Jean Grey, somehow in some crazy way, she was transported into the Heroes Reborn reality where she's confronted by Iron Man. He's kind of like, hey, who are you? And how in the world did you get here? And the thing is, in that reality, there is no X-Men at all. And so for Jean Grey, she's kind of like, wait a second. There's no Iron Man, because in her mindset, Iron Man is dead. She has not realized yet that she's in a different reality. Now, after a while, she does realize that. But the thing is, out of nowhere, Jean Grey is then pulled back into the main Marvel universe. And so as we switch back over to the X-Men, the main Marvel universe, and now Jean Grey is also back there as well, you now have the X-Men just trying their best to survive, because at the end of our last video for the X-Men, they were being attacked by some members of Operation Zero Tolerance. And so for our heroes, they're kind of like, this jet was not really made to take the hits it's currently taking at the moment. This jet was given to us. It's not a Blackbird. And so for our heroes, they're just trying their best at the moment to just hang on for dear life. Now, for Cannonball, his main goal is try to help the X-Men survive this situation. So he gets off the plane, he activates his powers to fight against the other jets that are currently being used by Operation Zero Tolerance. But while you have that going on, we switch over to Henry Gyrich. Now, man, Henry Gyrich is a complete jerk, but like, that's Henry Gyrich for you. And so what he's doing at the moment is trying to paint a picture of the X-Men technically being terrorists. He says the X-Men are a known terrorist group out there that had just randomly attacked 3 pilots who were just minding their business. The problem was they had no idea those 3 pilots are basically part of Operation Zero Tolerance. And so for Henry Gyrich, while being on live television saying all that, he's right now painting this bad picture of the X-Men. But it's also him explaining like what is Operation Zero Tolerance to the public. Because for the public, they didn't really know about this. Like the government did, of course, and so did the X-Men and us, the readers. But for the public, they had no idea. They're kind of like, wait, what's happening? It's Henry Gyrich saying that different countries around the world agreed to work together to allow Bastion the chance to build up his army to go after different mutants across the world to handle the mutant situation. And so right now for Bastion, this right here is him making his move. It's him going after the X-Men. It's Henry Gyrich right now trying his best to get the public on their side, because there are a few people out there who hate the idea of mutants. And really, that brings in a huge debate across the world. But before we're able to properly sit down and talk more about that debate, we have to switch back over to the X-Men. And the reason why, because it's the X-Men now getting their introduction to the Prime Sentinels. And for the X-Men, they're kind of like, yo, wait a second. What in the world are these things just flying around at the moment trying to take us out? They're Sentinels, but they're completely new. Now, for the X-Men, while they're trying their best to survive, at their school for Charles Xavier, the feds move in. Bastion and the Operation Zero Tolerance members, they also move in as well. They completely lock down the school of Charles Xavier. It's Bastion saying, I am making my move here and today. Like, it's time for me to bring down the entire idea of Charles Xavier's dream. But getting back over to the debate, you have different people across the nation right now watching the news. They're watching what's basically happening to people who are supposedly citizens across America, but now being attacked because they are mutants. And so they're kind of like, is this correct? Like, is this the correct path to take when it comes to the mutant race? And for some folks, it's completely wrong. For some folks, it's completely right. And so right now, for the public, they're kind of divided at the moment with the idea of Operation Zero Tolerance. With all that happening, though, we switch back over to the X-Men one last time. The reason why I say one last time, because for the X-Men, they have now been officially defeated by Bastion and his army, like Storm captured, Cyclops captured, Cannonball captured, Wolverine and Jean Grey, they may have gotten away, we don't know yet. But then we have to switch over to the school of Charles Xavier because, again, it's on complete lockdown. But it's Bastion right now moving into the actual building. But before we see what Bastion is trying to do at the school of Charles Xavier, there's still other members of the X-Men who are out there who weren't with the rest of the team. Like, for example, that would be Iceman. Because for Bobby Drake, he stepped away to take care of his father. Because for Bobby Drake, this man was away from the X-Men because his father got injured when he went undercover trying to bring down Graydon Creed. But now seeing the news, it's Bobby saying like, Dad, I gotta go. His dad's like, son, I understand. Go ahead and go. And so just like that, Iceman is back on the X-Men once again. But as we close on the first chapter, I kind of want to end the first chapter on this note right here when it comes to Bastion, but also like how we got here. Because for the X-Men, the 1990s, they had many crossovers. I mean, many crossovers. But the problem was the last few moments in time for X-Men in Marvel Comics kind of led into this moment. The idea of Onslaught, this mutant that attacked New York, killing off 34 people, killing off the Avengers, supposedly, killing off Fantastic Four, supposedly. But also on top of that, the death of Graydon Creed as well. That right there, a guy who was trying to run for president to hopefully handle the mutant situation got killed off. And other things prior to those events right there were just there, being building blocks as well, leading into Operation Zero Tolerance. And so for Bastion, we kind of find out the dude also has Charles Xavier with him. And you have Bastion being able to mimic the voice of Charles Xavier, allowing him the ability to access all the different files of Charles Xavier, better known as the Xavier Protocol. Just like that, Bastion has officially won in his head right now. He's all like, your dream is over. Like now, it's time for me to take over. Now, the next issue I do want to talk about is issue number 67 for X-Force, because here's the reason why. This issue is not really labeled as part of the Operation Zero Tolerance event, but as you read through it, you're like, oh yeah, this most definitely takes place in the actual event. And the reason why, because as we get into the opening pages of this storyline, this issue, we pick up at this research center. Now, this center was supposed to find a cure for cancer. The problem was that out of nowhere, you had this mutant group just move in and take over the entire place. Now, you do have the good old St. Louis feds there trying to figure out what they're going to do. But then out of nowhere, you have different operatives who work for Operation Zero Tolerance up here saying like, hey, we are officially taking over. This is a mutant problem that we have to handle. Now, we do learn like which mutant group out there right now is holding up this center, and that would be the Mutant Liberation Front. Now, we have not talked about them in a good while when it comes to our coverage over the X-Men, because really, they're really big when they first appeared in Marvel Comics working for Strife. Now, even though Strife is long gone by this point, you still have the group try their best to function out there as this terrorist group that goes out of their way to attack different places that might be targeting mutants. Like, for example, even though this place said like, hey, our main goal right now is to find a cure for cancer, they believe that's a fat lie. That in reality, they're right now trying to create another version of the legacy virus to hopefully kill off the mutant race. And that is why they're here at the moment. But we also get reminded about the idea of Danny Moonstar. Now, for Danny Moonstar, as we all know, she was one of the original members of the New Mutants. But the thing is, by this point in our coverage of the X-Men, we had learned that she is now an undercover SHIELD agent who's right now trying to bring down the Mutant Liberation Front. And the thing is that in the earlier parts of our coverage over X-Force, we saw her just pop up out of nowhere working with that group. And for the different members of the X-Force, especially the ones who were part of the New Mutants back in the day, they felt a tad bit betrayed about the idea of Danny Moonstar being with the Mutant Liberation Front, not really knowing that she is an undercover SHIELD agent. Now they know now, but they also kind of felt like she could have told them that she was an undercover SHIELD agent. Now we already know. You can't tell anybody anything when you go, I don't know, undercover. Now, with all that being said, when it comes to Danny Moonstar and the rest of the group, they just got word. The entire place is completely surrounded by operatives who work for Operation Zero Tolerance. And by this point, most mutants know about the idea of Operation Zero Tolerance. Like, you do not want to mess with these guys. They are the big leagues. But you do have Locust appear. Now, when she appears, she has the ability to get them the heck out of there. The problem is that for Wildside, he does not want to leave at all. He feels like they have a chance to take on different agents who work for Operation Zero Tolerance, but also they came here for a mission to basically bring down the whole entire center that's lying the world saying that they're trying to find a cure for cancer, that in reality, they're trying to create a new version of the legacy virus. And so he slaps Locust. Now, when he does that, that ticks her off and she teleports away, leaving the rest of the group behind. And when an event like this happening in this city, of course you have like different reporters just popping up left and right. But here's the thing, because out of nowhere, you have 3 people appear who are claiming to work for one of the local news channels. But in reality, it's different members of X-Force just in disguise. Sunspot, Siren, and also Domino. They're just in disguise at the moment. Now, with that being said, while they're there, you didn't have Moonstar see them on the computer screen. And she realized, okay, that's actually X-Force. And I can use them to help me accomplish my mission, which is bringing down the entire group here of Mutant Liberation Front. And so she tells Wildside, hey, why don't we go out of our way and bring in some reporters to share our story? With them coming inside, though, that also helps us keeping the different members of the Operation Zero Tolerance at bay long enough to figure out a way out of this situation. And so for Wildside, he agrees to do it. Now, for Domino, she does try to make a deal with the commander of this group, and that will be Ekaterina. Now, for Ekaterina, she'll become somewhat important for the overall story of X-Force. Like, we'll see her a few more times in our coverage of this team right here. But when it comes to her being the commander, Domino has no choice but to make a deal with her by basically saying, like, hey, listen, a member of the Mutant Liberation Front had called us and want us to do an interview with them inside that place. So allow us inside, but also we could possibly be used as a way to help you get the hostages out of there. Now, for the commander, she at first does not want to do that at all. But for Domino, she says, hey, let's not forget what happened in Waco. If things go south really fast here, that means your whole entire operation will lose its support from the people, but also from the government. And so for Domino, she now found her way inside the actual facility. Now, for a brief moment, we have to switch over to Cable and Caliban. Now, they're at the school of Charles Xavier, and as we all saw in the first chapter, the entire school got locked down. Now, we can technically say that this part right here does take place prior to the idea of the school of Charles Xavier getting locked down, so that's why you have Cable and also Caliban just chilling without being attacked by anybody at the moment. But when it comes to Caliban, we had to skip over a few issues because, well, some issues going on with books not being online just yet. And so when it comes to our cover of the X-Force, we missed the idea of finding out that for Caliban, he's now having seizures, but also having nightmares as well. And so for Cable, what he wants to do is get Caliban over to Moore McTaggart to run a few tests to figure out what exactly is going on with Caliban. What's even crazier is that for Caliban, at the same time he began to have these seizures and also having these nightmares around the same time that Archangel was able to regrow his old wings again. Let me explain, because as we all know, for Caliban and also Archangel, they both were modified by Apocalypse in the early parts of our coverage over X Factor. And so around the same time you had Angel being able to regain his lost wings, while at the same time Caliban began to have these nightmares, but also these seizures as well. But it's also Cable pointing out the fact that him and the other two characters have all been affected by Apocalypse in different ways. But getting back over to St. Louis, we see that Team A, which is Domino, Sunspot, and also Siren being fake reporters going inside the actual facility. There's a Team B. That'll be Richter, Meltdown, better known as Boom Boom, and also Shatterstar right now on the outside, just waiting for the time for things to pop off to help their team out in a tight situation. The problem is that when Team A go inside the actual building, the feed gets cut off, and Team B begins to freak out. As soon as they exit their van, they are confronted by the different members of Operation Zero Tolerance. They figured out what's happening here with X-Force and take out Team B just like that. And so now Team A is technically on their own at the moment. And this kind of leads us into, well, the ending of this chapter, because for Team A, they realize the feed has been cut off. And with the feed being cut off, they begin to, well, freak out. And so you have our heroes wondering what exactly is going on with Team B. But then you have different members of the Mutant Liberation Front realize that Team A are not really reporters, that instead they're really, X-Force. And so this leads into a small battle. Now, once you do have our heroes being able to win the battle, you also have Moonstar tell the different members of the MLF that she was an undercover SHIELD agent. And so her goal now is to call up SHIELD to have SHIELD move in, grab their targets, and also get X-Force the heck out of there. The problem is that inside the actual facility is 3 scientists who were actually members of Operation Zero Tolerance because they're Prime Sentinels. They changed their forms, and now Team A X-Force has to deal with Prime Sentinels at the moment. And the last thing about this chapter is that we see Caliban right now just laying in bed, not realizing that he has somebody watching over him. And that would be, well, Ozymandias. Now, when it comes to Ozymandias, he is technically a major character when it comes to Apocalypse. The question is now, what does he want with Caliban? And so as we dive into X-Force issue number 68, what we're getting into now is seeing our heroes trying their best to fight against the Prime Sentinels. The problem is that these Prime Sentinels were created in a way to be able to adapt to all types of mutant abilities. And so right now for the Prime Sentinels, they're really getting the edge over our heroes. And for our heroes, they also have the help of MLF to kind of help out with this situation. But the problem is the Prime Sentinels are just way too strong for our heroes. Now for Domino, what she did was she brought some explosives with her, and she says, hey, listen, I need everyone else to get the heck out of here while I stay behind and try my best to blow them up. She's also kind of hoping with the idea of her luck powers that she will basically survive. And so for X-Force, they had no choice. They have to leave her behind as she does use the explosives to hopefully defeat these 3 Prime Sentinels. Now, when it comes to X-Force, right after they do leave, you didn't have the commander move in. Now, when she does move in, she does recognize Domino. And we learn here that apparently her and Domino, they have some kind of connection between one another. The question is now, what is that connection? And matter of fact, she says, hey, listen, do not tell Bastion about her at all. I want you to her personally. Now, I kind of have been saying this for a while that when it comes to our coverage over the X-Men, running into this small issue where we're not really able to cover every single thing about the X-Men because a lot of different issues between X-Men, X-Force, X-Factor have not been officially brought over to the digital side of comics yet. And so with that happening, I'm not really able to cover a lot of different things. The reason why I bring that up right now, because when it came to X-Force comics, we had to go over like a good 5 or 6 issues. And so with that happening, we missed a very interesting storyline when it comes to Warpath. You see, there was this character known as Sledge. When it comes to Sledge, he was this random character that popped up out of nowhere. But for Sledge, he knew a young girl known as Risque. When it came to Risque, she was a young girl that was saved by him. But he said, because I saved you, you now have to help me in the future. Fast forward, the future came. And so he told her, hey, listen, I need you to bring me a mutant known as Warpath. And so, of course, she did. The problem was for Warpath and Risque, at first, it did seem like these two characters could fall in love with one another. But in reality, that was not the case at all. It was just her playing him to get him over to Sledge. Because Sledge, when he used Warpath to go into a different dimension to find his lost friend. His lost friend is Vanisher. Now, we had talked a lot about Vanisher in the past, but for the sake of this video, I'm not going to sit down and re-explain who he is because he's not really major right now for the whole idea of Operation Zero Tolerance. But for Warpath, that is why he's not with X-Force at the moment, because right now he's working with Sledge. Now, the reason why you have Warpath agree to work with Sledge is because Warpath is currently looking for somebody known as Michael Whitecloud. Now, when it comes to Michael, he's part of Warpath's tribe. The problem was that at the very beginning of X-Force comics, we saw the entire tribe get taken out. And so with that being said, for Warpath, his entire family was also wiped out as well. And so he believed his whole entire tribe was gone, to only find out that one member of his tribe is still alive. And that'll be Michael Whitecloud. The problem is Warpath can't find him, and Sledge said, if you help me, then I can help you find your missing person. Now, getting back over to the Commander, we see her having a conversation with Bastion. Now, this conversation is really more of her lying to Bastion's face. Now, at first, she tells the truth, like, hey, listen, we have captured some members of X-Force, but also some members of the Mutant Liberation Front as well. But unfortunately, we had also lost Domino. Now, with that being said, we already know she's lying. She captured Domino. And for Bastion, he wanted to use Domino as a way to get to Cable. But now he's hearing like, oh, Domino got away? That sucks. But in reality, the Commander is holding on to her. But this begins us learning like what is the actual connection between Domino and also this Commander. Now, the Commander had told us that she has been trying to study the past of Domino to figure out everything about Domino. Now, here's the thing, because she does try her best to share us different pieces of information about Domino. But here's the problem though. Some of these information pieces that she's giving us cannot be confirmed by the book nor by Domino. The only two things we can confirm right now is the idea that one, Domino was married, and two, Domino was part of a team called Six Pack alongside with Cable. But the rest is kind of questionable. But the question is right now, okay, why was Commander trying to learn everything about Domino for? Like, what did Domino do to Commander in the past? And we learned that in the past, there was this facility, right? This facility was basically trying to create this special kind of link between people and drones to be used out there in the battlefield without the idea of putting human lives in danger. The problem was that you had Domino break into that facility to get the person that was trying to create that project. Now, for Domino, she had to face against a drone that was cyberlinked to somebody. And so when it came to Domino, when she had used an EMP to shut down that drone, there was a massive feedback that went over to the drone's host. That host was the commander, and she was put into a coma for many months. Now, for Bastion, he came by and took her and turned her into a prime sentinel, but also kind of used her as an undercover agent to kind of learn more information, possibly about the X-Men, but especially about different people like Domino and other mutants. But for the commander, she loves the idea that she was saved by Bastion to get the chance to get back at Domino. And the issue ends on that note right there. And of course, this is where, okay, so getting back into our coverage over Operation Zero Tolerance, we have now officially reached that point where we're going to sit down and talk about Cable's part in this actual event. Now, in our first video, we had talked about the idea that you had Bastion being able to arrive at the school of Charles Xavier and lock down the entire place. And so you also had Bastion trying to access the Xavier protocol. Now, the protocol is really more different files on different members of the X-Men and tells people how to bring them down. And so for Bastion, he's right now trying to access that to bring down the X-Men, X-Force, X-Factor, Excalibur, like all the different X teams across the country right now at the moment will be officially hit by Bastion if he's able to access the Xavier protocol. And so when it comes to Cable, his main goal right now is to just get back into the building, because in our last video, he was there prior to Bastion being able to lock down the entire building, and he was hanging out with Caliban, but then he left the building. And so this is Cable right now coming back home and seeing what's actually happening to the school of Charles Xavier. Now, before Cable had came back home, he went to a nearby bar. And the reason why, because he got a message from G.W. Bridges. Now, for G.W., it was really him trying to inform Cable about a different attack coming his way, not from Bastion nor part of the Operation Zero Tolerance group. And so while you had the two guys talking to one another about a different attack, you then had GW tell Cable to turn on the TV. And the reason why, because, well, as we saw in the first chapter of this event, you had the X-Men get attacked by Bastion and his Operation Zero Tolerance operatives, but also you had Henry Gyrich basically lie on live television calling the X-Men terrorists, and the X-Men had attacked random pilots for no actual good reason. And so for Cable, he realized what could possibly happen next. You do have the two characters continue to talk on a different phone call. Now, when they do, it's really more of Cable kind of reminding us that for the public, they don't really know the home base for the X-Men is actually the school of Charles Xavier, including S.H.I.E.L.D. And so for GW, he's also informing Cable like, hey, listen, so Bastion just shut down the entire school of Charles Xavier. What in the world is going on there? And for Cable, he can't tell GW anything about the school, about the fact that the X-Men technically work out of that school. But it's also the fact that for Cable, he knows that Bastion is right now trying to access, well, of course, the Xavier Protocol files. Get those files, he can then go after anybody in the X family. And so it's Cable informing GW, if you don't hear from me in 6 hours, you know what you gotta do. And just like that, Cable ends the call and he goes back over to school of Charles Xavier. Now, in our last video, we had also talked about the idea of Caliban, because in our coverage over X-Force, we kind of talked about how like Caliban right now is having seizures, having nightmares, not really feeling well. And so in our last video, in the X-Force chapters, you saw Cable leave Caliban behind to kind of like get some rest. That happened, but now the whole entire school being on lockdown, for Cable, he has two missions. to basically protect the Xavier protocol, but to also get Caliban the heck out of there. And so you have Cable right now just trying his best to get over to Caliban, which he's able to do. The problem is that as soon as he arrives in that room, you have different operatives inform one another like, hey, listen, we got Cable. He's right now in that other room with the other mutant, better known as Caliban. And so this chopper just comes around and begin to shoot into the actual room. And because you had Cable go inside that room where Caliban was at, that's technically their only exit, that one entrance right there. And so for Cable, he realized they're going to have to go out there gun blazing, but he also hands Caliban his device to say, hey, listen, when the time comes, and I'll let you know when, hit that device. That will basically help us get the heck out of this situation, because outside that door is more operatives who are part of Operation Zero Tolerance, but also Bastion is there as well. And let's not forget, in our last video, he wanted to use Domino as a way to get to Cable. He wanted to make sure he captured Cable. But either way, as this chapter closes, we pick up with Cable and also Caliban just barging out of the room, gun blazing, and hoping to bring down, well, all those different operatives of Operation Zero Tolerance, but to also get away. And so as we get into the next chapter, we're really getting into the idea of Cable just right now trying to, fight alongside Caliban against all these different operatives of Operation Zero Tolerance. Here's the thing, because when it comes to Cable and also Caliban, they're getting overrun. But let's not forget, Caliban has a device that Cable handed him. And it's Cable right now saying like, hey, Caliban, it's about time for you to hit that button. Because we learn here that when Cable first moved into the Xavier Institute, what he did was he kind of added different programs to the Danger Room, but also other security systems around the entire school. And so all these spike balls just appear out of nowhere, allowing Cable and Caliban the chance to get the heck out of there, which of course they do. Now for Bastion, once he does recover, he's kind of like, hey, I need you guys to find Cable now. Like, there's no way he can survive much longer. So go ahead and find the man when you can. And this kind of leads into a sad moment for me, because we're now seeing Cable telling Caliban like, hey, we are now in the Morlock tunnels. Like, there's one tunnel that literally led over the school of Charles Xavier. Take this tunnel and get the heck out of here. My goal right now, as soon as you leave, is to blow up the way into the tunnel so that they can't follow you. And for Cable, he's going to stay behind because this man wants to make sure that Bastion can't be able to access the Xavier protocol. So with all that being said, though, for Caliban, he doesn't want to leave Cable behind because he looks up to Cable. These two characters have built a close bond with one another. But it's Cable right now saying like, dude, we don't have a choice here. Like, you gotta go. But it's also Cable promising Caliban like, hey, I won't forget about you at all. I care for you a lot. But unfortunately, you gotta go. It is really sad. For Caliban, he's like, I want to stay, but Cable's right, I gotta go. I'm injured. I'll be really, unreliable in the next battle against the operatives of Operation Zero Tolerance. And so right after you have those two characters say their goodbyes to one another, Cable gets right back to work. He's like, okay, cool. Now it's time for me to make sure that Bastion cannot access those files at all. And so we see Cable just working his way over to where the computer could be at. And I love this so much because it shows off Cable's skills. Now, yes, there have been other books in the past that done that. But like for me personally, this right here does a great job. He's a one-man army doing all these different moves to be able to bring down a few operatives to allow him the chance to hopefully stop Bastion. And so after you have Cable arrive at the actual computer, it's now Cable trying to download all the files into a disk and then put that disk into one of his pockets on his uniforms. But he makes sure his uniform will self-destruct if basically someone does kill him so that they will not be able to get their hands on the actual files. Now, before you have Cable leave, he calls up Nate Gray, X-Man, his technically counterpart from the Age of Apocalypse reality. Now, when it comes to Nate and Cable, these two characters don't have a good relationship with one another. But is Cable kind of wondering if there is a possibility that Bastion had possibly sent soldiers or the home of the Greys. And so it's Cable right now asking Nate to, go out of his way to protect the Greys, Jean Grey's parents and her niece and nephew, just in case those soldiers do go over there and try to capture them as well. And so for Nate, even though he does not like anybody on the X-Men, he's kind of like, fine, I'll do this for you. And so, of course, you have Nate and Cable agree on the idea. Now, right after you have Cable do that, you then have Cable try to leave the building. Like, hey, you know what? It's time for me right now to get the heck out of here. The problem is that right after you have Cable go out of his way to destroy the computer, he's then confronted by Bastion. And we're like, okay, that's the end of this chapter. Now, in our last video for this event, we had covered the first 2 chapters of X-Force, and I kind of want to go ahead and cover issue number 69. Now, here's the thing, because we pick up with Domino. Now, in our last video, we saw Domino and a few other members of X-Force get captured by some Prime Sentinels. The thing was, Domino was a special case, and the reason why, because Domino had a connection to the commander of that group of Prime Sentinels, and her name, and most likely I am going to mispronounce, is Ekaterina. When it came to that commander, she wanted to get revenge against Domino for what Domino did to her many years ago. Now the thing is, as we dive into issue number 69, we're seeing that Domino is technically free, but the thing is, it does seem like she is completely drained. Now, as she does walk into the middle of the street, she's then confronted by this truck driver who does go out of his way to help her out, and his name is Spencer. Now, before we're able to learn more about Spencer, we switch over to, well, the commander who had that weird connection with Domino. Now, we still see her and her guys still holding on to the few members of X-Force that they had captured earlier. That would be Shatterstar, Richter, and also Meltdown. But she does tell her guys, like, hey, listen, so we're gonna quick pit stop because we gotta meet up with some people. Now, the people that she's gonna meet up with are not working with Operation Zero Tolerance. They are a third-party group with their own plans when it comes to our heroes. The question is right now, what are their plans? Now, some members of X-Force were still able to get away. The problem is only 3 of them. That will be Sunspot, Siren, and also Moonstar. Now, we're also getting reminded here that for Moonstar, she was working for S.H.I.E.L.D. as a way to bring down the Mutant Liberation Front group. But G.W. Bridges, the guy in charge of S.H.I.E.L.D., well, he got word about what Operation Zero Tolerance was going to do to Moonstar, but also to the MLF group. And so he contacted X-Force to get Moonstar the heck out of there. And so it's Moonstar right now saying, like, I'm still a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, and GW, he owes me one. And so for X-Force, their main goal at the moment is to find a way to save their missing team members at the moment. Now, I do want to say that this chapter does take place right in the middle of, well, the last chapter of Cable, because we pick up with Caliban and also, well, Cable having that conversation all over again. And really, it's really more the book just showing us that, hey, this is what happened over in that chapter, just in case you were not reading Cable comics. Caliban had got away from the Operation Zero Tolerance operatives, and now the question is, will he be able to return back over to the X-Force team? Now, this leads us into the Warpath storyline that I don't really care about, but unfortunately we gotta cover it. And I know there's some Warpath fans out there. For me, this storyline is just weird. Okay, so for Warpath, he met this girl known as Risque. Risque was a young girl who appeared out of nowhere and was able to build a relationship with him, and they became a couple. The problem was that she was working for somebody else known as Sledge. When it came to Sledge, he had saved Risque many years ago, but told her, like, hey, because I saved your life, you're gonna need to help me out down the road. And of course, that time came where he said, I need you to bring me Warpath. And the reason why, because he wanted to use Warpath and sent Warpath into another dimension. And the only reason why Warpath agreed to this is because, okay, for Warpath, he found out that at the very beginning of the X-Force series, his entire tribe was wiped out, including all his family members. The thing was, he found out recently that apparently somebody from his tribe was actually alive. And for Sledge, he knew the location of where that guy was at. But Sledge said, I will not tell you where that guy is at until you help me, which means you have to go into that other dimension and bring my friend, the Vanisher, back home. Now, getting back over to the commander, we technically see her meeting up with 3 doctors. Now, these 3 doctors are going to bring in another concept in the world of X-Force comics, but not in the middle of this event. Really, a couple of issues after this event where there is this foundation. But anyways, these doctors were the reason why you had the commander being able to wake up from her coma. Because in our last video, we had talked about the idea that she had this cyber link to this drone. Except when it came to Domino using an EMP, she knocked out the drone, but of course sending huge feedback to the commander and putting her into a coma. These doctors woke her up from that coma and allow her the chance to be grabbed by Bastion and then have Bastion turn her into a Prime Sentinel. We also learn here that they are the reason why Sunspot had turned into Rainfire. Now, I'm not going to sit down and try to re-explain the whole idea of Rainfire because for the sake of this video, it's not really important. But we do see these 3 doctors being able to place trackers in the 3 captured X-Force members. Now we do switch over to Warpath one more time. Now for Warpath, he does get confronted by this creature that had took a form of one of his pets from his past. And the reason why, because this creature wants to guide Warpath over to where Vanisher is at. Here's the thing, because when it comes to Vanisher, he was one of the early day versions of Marvel's teleporters, right? And when it came to Vanisher, he had the ability to teleport across the world. What he did was he kind of slid between different dimensions to get to different points across the world. The problem is now, Homeboy got stuck in this dimension. And so for Sledge, he's kind of like, hey, Warpath, go into that dimension and get the Vanisher out of there. The problem is right now, the creatures in this dimension do not want to allow Vanisher to leave at all. But this kind of leads us into the ending points of this chapter of Operation Zero Tolerance. And the thing is, we're not going to see X-Force for a brief moment, but we do see that you do have the different members of X-Force minus Domino being able to find the commander, but also being able to save their team members as well. Oh, by the way, they also take down the commander. Now, the 3 doctors who were there earlier, they were able to barely escape. So of course, and come back again down the road. But after you have X-Force, going out of their way to save their teammates, we switch back over to Domino. And to close on this chapter, you have Domino trying to call up the school of Charles Xavier. The problem is that she can't reach anybody because, as we all saw, the entire school got locked down by Bastion. And so right now, she's going to freak out. But she's also kind of hinting at the idea that she may have lost her luck ability. And that right there is pretty huge. But okay, so I kind of realized that when it came to Operation Zero Tolerance, it's kind of all over the place. And what I mean by that is when you look online for different reading orders, the reading orders are just all over the place. But I also kind of realized that for some of the X teams that were involved in this event, their storylines are kind of minor. So for example, X-Force, even though technically they were part of the Operation Zero Tolerance event, their story was kind of out there, just on its own, while you had the X-Men and Wolverine books be the main storyline for the entire event, and you had Cable kind of play somewhat of a major role as well. But when it came to Generation X, they also kind of had their own storyline, but just out there on its own. And X-Men had an issue, but it's not labeled Operation Zero Tolerance, even though it does kind of involve him being part of this event as well. And that's why I say, like, it's just all over the place. But here's the thing. It's still all good to me. Like, so far, I'm enjoying reading all these different books. But getting into Cable, we really do pick up where our last video left off when it came to us covering Cable. Because remember, once Cable found out that Bastion had completely locked down the school of Charles Xavier, his main goal was to break into the school to delete the Xavier Protocol. Because the Xavier Protocol is this thing that Charles Xavier made to help people out just in case they had to go after the X-Men and bring them down. In that protocol system, it gives you all the details on every single X-Men, on how to defeat them. And so for Bastion, he wanted that because there's still other X characters out there that he has not captured. He already got Cyclops, Storm, Jean Grey, Wolverine, and Cannonball, but what about Gambit and also Rogue and Beast? Now, currently, those characters, they're out in space at the moment, but they can come back anytime. And if they do, well, for Bastion, he'll have the protocols to help him out. And so for Cable, he was able to download the protocol onto a disk. The thing was, when he was about to leave, he was then confronted by Bastion. And when it comes to Bastion, it's him right now telling Cable like, hey, listen, so the one thing I was not able to download was the Xavier protocols, but I did download other information like Cerebro. Now, that is pretty big, and here's the reason why, because for Cable, the dude has the gun. Like, he can literally shoot Bastion and everything will be over. But the problem is, Bastion says, if you kill me, I have guys out there ready to finish the job for me, because with me being able to download Cerebro, I was able to collect information about all you guys and all your relatives as well. But also with Cerebro, when it came to Charles Xavier, he had located mutants across the world and basically charted them. And with them being written down, he now knows who to go after next, but to also go after the relatives as well, with the possibility that they could also become mutants down the road. And so for Bastion, he's saying, hey, if you kill me, I'm going after everybody, even your relatives as well, because I know about you. Your last name is Summers, you're from the future, you're the son of Cyclops and Jean Grey, Cyclops and Madeline Pryor. You have the techno-organic virus. Like, Bastion knows everything about Cable. And so while you have the two guys talking to one another, Cable realized there's some soldiers right now trying to pull off a sneak attack. But for Cable, he does have the ability to read minds of other people. So even though they were trying to pull off this attack, Cable knew what was coming. Cable knew what he had to do. And so he was able to defend himself, but he also grabbed Bastion and went into a different room. Here's the problem though, because once again for Cable and also Bastion, they're now trapped in this other room as well, and there's only one way out. Well, on the other side of that door are a few more soldiers who work for Bastion. Now, for Cable, he said, listen, in case you didn't know, I'm a psychic. I can read people's minds. But it's also Cable realizing that he can't read the mind of Bastion, which kind of gives the idea that this guy is not your normal human at all. Because for Cable, even though technically he's not really able to read the mind of Bastion, there should be some mind in his body that for Cable to kind of see. But for Cable, he's kind of like, no, it does seem like this guy has no brain at all, no mind for me to try to dig into. But it's also Cable kind of realized what he could do to get out of this situation. So you have Cable being able to use his telekinesis to hold Bastion in place. And you then have Cable turn Bastion around and put a gun to his back. And the plans to walk out of his room by using Bastion as a hostage. But for Cable, he also realized that's not going to work. And so what Cable did was he told all the different soldiers to just go away. So right now is Cable using a huge portion of his powers to try to get out of this situation. But the problem is right now for Cable is that he has the techno-organic virus, and he has been using his powers as a way to keep the virus at bay in his body. And so with Cable trying to do all these different things at once, sending thousands of soldiers away from the estate, but also mind wiping them, but also using telekinesis to keep Bastion in place. It's just putting a strain on Cable's mind and his body. Now, you do have Cable kind of, pass out here, but the thing is, even though you have Bastion being able to pick up the gun was out of bullets. So he could not use the gun to kill off Cable, but Cable does pass out. Now for Cable, when he wakes back up, Bastion just disappeared. But on top of that, so did everything in the mansion. So we're kind of left to wonder what happened to school of Charles Xavier in later chapters. But also, why did Bastion leave Cable behind? Now, with all that being said, we now see Cable meeting up with G.W. Bridges. And for G.W., is him informing Cable that Senator Kelly is right now trying his best to shut down Operation Zero Tolerance, but it might take a minute. But then as the book closes, we did switch over to the Hellfire Club. And this storyline will kind of continue in later videos we do for Cable. The idea that Donald Pierce, somebody who's part of the inner circle, wants to come after Cable. And really, that's the end for Cable's part in this event. Now, I kind of want to go ahead and cover X-Men issue number 30. And here's the thing, because issue number 30, for me, is actually part of Operation Zero Tolerance. And even though it does not have the label on the cover, it so is part of the actual event, because remember, when it came to Cable in his chapters, he had contacted Nate Gray saying, hey Nate, listen, I need your help. I know you hate everything about the X-Men and all the different X families, but I need you to help us out here. I need you to go protect the Greys, because for Bastion, most likely he'll go after the Greys. And the thing is, Bastion told Cable after you had Cable contact Nate Gray. And so we saw in that chapter that Nate did agree to go out of his way to protect the Greys. And so that's why I say this issue is so part of Operation Zero Tolerance. Now, in some reading orders, they leave this issue out completely. But in most reading orders, it's right there like in a random spot, because it's not technically labeled Operation Zero Tolerance. And for some people, they don't know where to place the actual issue when it comes to the reading order for this event. Now, the last time we saw Nate Gray, it was really more of him just leaving the Brotherhood behind. You know, this group right now being led by Havoc, and they had some deadly gas that technically hit Nate Gray. And matter of fact, we covered the entire storyline. I should link that video. But anyways, after you have Nate Gray being able to get away from them in that deadly gas, he had crashed right in the middle of Central Park. Now, he was then founded by these three random ladies, and unfortunately, we're not really able to learn their names just yet, and they do come somewhat important for later issues down the road. I'm kind of hoping those issues are aligned. But anyways, when it comes to Nate Gray, he has been trying to recover with their assistance. But while he was recovering, you didn't have Nate Gray be contacted by, Cable. And once he does get that contact, it's Cable giving Nate Gray the complete rundown about what exactly is happening when it comes to Operation Zero Tolerance. Because for Nate, he had no idea what's happening, but now he does. Now, at first, for Nate, he does not want to help out Cable at all. But it's Cable saying like, fine, don't do it for me, but do it for Jean Grey, because in Nate Gray's reality, he's technically the son to Jean Grey and also Cyclops. And even though he did not really get the chance to learn everything about his Jean Grey, when he arrived here, he kind of wanted to know a tad bit about this reality's version of Jean Grey. And so for Nate, he's kind of like, fine, I will go out of my way to protect my supposed grandparents and also my cousins as well, because there is a possibility that those kids could become mutants down the road. But here's the problem, because for Nate Gray, he was kind of going in and out of it when it came to him recovering from the last storyline. And so for Cable, he had most likely contacted Nate Gray a couple of days ago, but for Nate, he had no idea. And so once you have Nate wake up, he tried his best to locate the Grays. Now, we switch over to Soho, and when we do, we pick up with two prime sentinels at the moment questioning this random child because they feel like three members of the Gray family is currently hiding in the sewers. That will be Jean Grey's father, her niece, and also her nephew. The thing is, they are correct. They find them. Now the kids are able to run away, but for Jean Grey's father, he does get grabbed by one of the prime sentinels. And at first, it does look like he is going to die. But then at the very last second, you have Nate Gray arrive. Now, when Nate does arrive, he does use his powers on one of the prime sentinels that was attacking Joseph. Here's the problem though, because even though it does seem like Nate was able to take down that prime sentinel, for Nate, he's not at full strength. But on top of that, prime sentinels have the ability to recover, heal themselves up, but to also adapt to the powers that was currently used on them. And so for Nate Gray, his powers will no longer work on that one prime sentinel that he just fought. But this allows Nate Gray and also, well, Jean Grey's father to have a conversation where you have Jean Grey's father find out that Nate's last name is Gray, meaning that they could possibly be related in some kind of way, even though technically they're not, because Nate Gray is from a different reality. But either way, you had Nate leave Joseph behind, Jean Grey's father, to go back and reunite with her mother, while you have Nate try his best to protect the kids. But like I said, for Nate Gray, his powers are no longer going to work on that one prime sentinel. Now the other one, it could still possibly work, but either way for Nate Gray, his main goal at the moment is to protect the kids. And right now, he's trying his best to do that. But we also get reminded of Madeline Pryor. Now, here's the thing, because as we all know, Madeline Pryor is a clone of Jean Grey, but she is the mother to Cable. Now, when it comes to Madeline, we learned in our last video or two that she was actually brought back to life by Nate Gray because he tried his best to locate Jean Grey, or wanting the Jean Grey from his reality. And so when he tried to get that Jean Grey back, he had brought Madeline Pryor back to life. And the two characters did fall in love with one another. But after she had discovered that she was brought back to life by him, and once she began to remember everything from her past, she's trying to somewhat keep her distance. But at the same time, she realized that Nate Gray is in trouble, but she can't leave to help him. And the reason why, Operation Zero Tolerance. They could possibly go after her as well. And so currently she has to stay with the Hellfire Club. But getting back over to Nate Gray, you have Nate Gray trying his best to fight against two prime sentinels. Now the second one, he didn't fight earlier, so his powers does work on the second one. But here's the thing, because it's also Nate Gray beginning to learn more about the prime sentinels. The whole idea that they are humans who were turned into sentinels, because you have Nate Gray being able to look into the mind of the second one. When he does that, he discovers like, oh my God, they're human, but like they're machine parts all over their bodies. What in the world is going on here? But either way, you do have Nate Gray kind of cast this illusion where for the two prime sentinels, they believed they had killed off Nate Gray and also Jean Grey's family. But in reality, they had survived, allowing Nate Gray to get the kids back over to Jean Grey's grandparents. Or sorry, her parents, not her grandparents. Now, with Bastion being able to cast that illusion, for Bastion on his end, the mission was accomplished. Nate Gray is dead, Jean Grey's nephew's dead, and so is Jean Grey's niece. But in reality, all three characters had survived. Now, for Bastion, it also seems like he does not have much information on Nate Gray. But he also realized that when it came to Nate Gray trying to access the mind of that Prime Sentinel, he was also getting very close to overloading the mainframe for Operation Zero Tolerance. And that right there is pretty powerful for Nate Gray to do by using just one Prime Sentinel. But either way, that's his chapter for the entire event of Operation Zero Tolerance. And so now we have to switch over to Uncanny X-Men issue number 346. Now here's the thing, because this issue is really more about Spider-Man and his characters around him, but also the Morlocks as well, because of course, with the whole idea of Operation Zero Tolerance being out there, they should also be affected by this event. And really, as we get into the opening pages of the storyline, we're being quickly reminded about J. Jonah Jameson and his involvement in the whole idea of, well, Operation Zero Tolerance, because his main goal in earlier storylines in Candy X-Men was to discover like what is really going on when it comes to Bastion. Because for Bastion, we already knew like a long time ago, his main goal was to get rid of the mutant race. But for JJ, he's kind of like, no, I want to know everything about Operation Zero Tolerance, but the past about Bastion as well. Now, we saw in an earlier storyline when it came to JJ, he has sent a reporter to collect information about Bastion and his operation. That reporter got killed off a while back. And so for JJ, he's even more upset about the idea that he had a reporter be killed on that assignment. And so even though at this point in the event, you have the X-Men captured, you have some members of X-Force who were captured but now being free again, it's really more of JJ saying like, I don't believe what the other media sources are reporting at the moment. The whole idea of the X-Men being terrorists and going out of their way to attack like a random group of pilots. Like, no, for me, I feel like Bastion and the rest of the people who are involved with the whole idea of the operation are lying to the public. And so it's our goal to reveal the truth as the Daily Bugle. So you didn't have JJ say, all right, guys, get out there and get me my information. Now for Robbie, he does tell JJ that he has sent Peter out on assignment to get a picture of Henry Gyrich. Because as we all know, when it comes to Henry Gyrich, he had played a major role in the idea of getting Operation Zero Tolerance kicked off, but especially in America. And so he's one of the few people in the government who has like secretly worked behind the scenes on the operation, even though now for Henry Gyrich, he kind of hates the idea where the operation is currently going, just hunting down people who could possibly be mutants. Matter of fact, for JJ, he brings up the fact that it's right now kind of like witch hunting. Like you don't truly know in case that somebody could possibly be a mutant or not, or just somebody with powers. And next thing you know, they're being targeted, killed off, are captured by the operation. Now, with all that being said, when it comes to Peter, he does find Henry Gyrich, but the problem is you had two Morlocks decide to go ahead and go after Henry Gyrich because of his involvement with the operation. And that would be Marrow and also Callisto. Now, we also get reminded that for the Uncanny X-Men book, it was really being used for a second X-Men team who were out there in space in the last few storylines. And so you have the book kind of quickly remind us that, hey, they're still out there in space at the moment. And unfortunately, they kind of crashed on a random planet. And for Gambit, he just got confronted by a random creature. Now, we're not told where they are or what that creature was, but it's just reminding us like, hey, listen, the X-Men right now, this group right here, they're not on Earth, but don't worry, sooner or later, they should be back. But as we switch back over to Earth and pick up with JJ, it's JJ right now just trying his best to get any piece of information that he can. Like, for example, we see him right now at the moment just being confronted by Bastion after getting off the call with some people who also supposedly supported the operation. Now, for Bastion, him and JJ, they had talked before in the past, and really it was more of Bastion trying to warn JJ to sit down and try to scare JJ. The thing is, you can't really easily scare JJ unless you have some kind of powers and do some wild things in his office. But for JJ, he does not back down. He's all like, no, listen, my goal is to reveal everything about you and also your operation. But you didn't have Bastion put down this disc. Now, this disc contains information that he had downloaded from Xavier's computer. It has information on every single person who's part of the X family, but possibly other people who are out there that Charles had met as well. And so that right there is a big scoop, because now you are talking about the idea of the public finding out different people out there who are part of the X family and their real names. And that right there is really bad for the X-Men, but at least for JJ, it's a gold mine. That means he'll have the biggest news at the moment. Money just coming in left and right. But now we switch back over to Spider-Man and also, well, Callisto and Marrow. Now, here's the thing, because for Callisto, she's not really there to kill off Henry Gyrich. Marrow is. And let's not forget that Marrow is part of Gene Nation. And when it came to Gene Nation, they had a real big goal to kill off the human race because, hey, look at what the humans did towards mutants so far. Anyways, though, you do have Spider-Man trying his best to stop the two of them. Now, we come to find out the two bodyguards that were with Henry Gyrich, they are actually Prime Sentinels, and they begin to target Marrow. Now, you have Callisto go out of her way to protect Marrow, but unfortunately, she got hit pretty hard. So the question is she going to be able to survive? This kind of leads into a very interesting moment, and let me explain, because we kind of find out these two Prime Sentinels are planning on killing off Henry Gyrich now. And the reason why, because they were supposed to be covert, like make sure you do a good job safeguarding Henry, but like make sure no one knows that he's around, but also like no one knows your Prime Sentinels. Well, of course, all those things fell apart very quickly. And so now they're saying, you know what? Let's go ahead and do program Scorch the Earth. Meaning that let's go ahead and kill off Henry Gyrich and the other guy who's also a bodyguard or assistant with Henry as well. Now, at the same time, you have the assistant with Henry Gyrich inform us that these are the same two bodyguards who were around Graydon Creed. So now we're kind of left to wonder, are these two bodyguards the ones who had killed off Graydon over in X Factor Comics? We don't know. But here's the thing, because now for Spider-Man and Marrow, they're trying their best to bring down the two Prime Sentinels. Now, in the middle of the battle, you have Henry being able to use his gun to shoot them down, to shut them down. Now, as we all know, for Prime Sentinels, they are able to adapt to previous attacks. So sooner or later, these two guys will get right back up and his gun is no longer going to work. But this kind of leads into the ending of this chapter and also really this video, because as we do switch over to JJ, you really do have JJ say like, hey, listen, there is no way I'm going to allow myself to work with you, Bastion, and take this disc and use this disc for, you know, evil things. There's no way I'm going to do that. That's not me. But on top of that is him saying like, I am devoted to prove who you are, to bring out your true origin to the entire world and why in the world you hate mutants so much for. Now, I kind of like the ending of this book because it's really more Spider-Man being able to reach out to Marrow. He's kind of like, hey, listen, like I get the idea of hating on people who hate you because listen, with me being Spider-Man, there's a world out there that hates me, but there's a small list of people who care for me. But for her, she wants to know, then why are you out there trying to risk your life for people who hate you? And it's him saying like, because there was a point in time, the only thing I cared about was me, and it got somebody close to me killed. And so right now for Marrow is her realizing like, okay, you know what? Fine. I won't go after Henry Gyrich for now because right now Callisto needs a healer. But in the future, if I see him again, I'm going to try to kill him. Okay, so we are now officially at that point where when it comes to our coverage over Operation Zero Tolerance, we're not really going to sit down and talk a lot about Cable nor really X-Force either. We're now going to shift our focus mainly on the X-Men, Wolverine, and also Generation X for the second half of Operation Zero Tolerance. Now, with that being said, we're also kind of getting into the idea of new characters being introduced in the middle of this event, especially when it came to X-Men issue number 66. Because in the last chapter for issue number 65, we were introduced to a bunch of different random people kind of expressing
how they truly felt about the idea of Bastion going after mutants. You have some folks out there who hated the idea. You had some folks out there who loved the idea. But you had a couple of panels focused on one character who was a nurse, Nurse Reyes. Now, guys, real quickly, there are some characters in X-Men comics I kind of feel like that get forgotten about over time because there are so many different X-Men characters. And for me personally, she's one of those characters. Now, it's not me saying like she's a bad character, just that there are so many other characters out there in the world of X-Men comics that she kind of got put on the back burner. But the thing was, when we saw her, it was really her kind of expressing the idea that, yeah, what Bastion is doing is correct. Somebody should have gone after the X-Men, but also gone after mutants across the world as well. But this kind of shifts over to the idea where you do have this patient come in. And so for her being the nurse, it's her goal and her team's goal to help save the man's life. Now, after a few pages, we see that she wasn't really able to go out of her way to save this man's life. And so for her, she has to call it. Now, while you do have her and her team calling the death of this random patient, she comes to find out that this guy is not really just a random patient, that in reality, he is a prime sentinel. And the thing is, he was sent here to go after a mutant that was hiding in this hospital. And that would be Nurse Reyes. And you see, for Nurse Reyes, she has the ability to put up these shields around her body as a way to protect her. Now, we get the idea that she knew she was a mutant. And matter of fact, somebody came to her early on in her life wanting to help her. We already know that would be Charles Xavier. But for Reyes here, it's now her trying her best to basically survive fighting against this prime sentinel, and she's barely able to hold on. Now, in the last chapter, we had also talked about the idea that you had a few X-Men characters out there who weren't captured by Bastion, one of them being, of course, Iceman. And so for Iceman, it's him coming out of his way to help Dr. Reyes. Now, when it comes to Dr. Reyes, she does inform us that when it came to Charles Xavier, he did promise her, like, hey, listen, I'll make sure, like, you're not really involved in the whole idea of, you know, being the X-Men, because for Charles Xavier, he wanted her to join the X-Men, but she said no. But he also offered the idea of protecting her. But the problem is, Charles Xavier is no longer around. The dude got arrested right after Onslaught. But on top of that, when it came to Bastion, he was able to access the files of Cerebro. And so with him doing that, he was able to locate different mutants that Charles had found in the past while using Cerebro. Now for Iceman, he's kind of like, listen, Reyes, I'm pretty sure that when it came to Charles Xavier, he did really promise you that. And he really did try his best to make sure that you were well protected. But the thing is, Xavier is gone. And this is bigger than Xavier, bigger than the X-Men. Like, this guy Bastion is going after the entire mutant race across the globe. And so it's Bobby right now saying, like, we need to work together if we're going to be able to help save all the mutants across the world. And so you do have Reyes aside to join Iceman's side. And we also learn here that the reason why Dr. Reyes had basically decided to become a doctor is because when it came to her father, he had died right in front of her. And so with his death, it kind of put her on that track of becoming a doctor, being able to help out other people who are possibly in need. But getting over to Bastion as a way to close on this chapter, you have Bastion wanting to gloat about the idea that he was able to get his hands on 4 of the mutants that belongs to Charles Xavier X-Men: Cyclops, Jean Grey, Storm, and also Wolverine. Now, let's not forget that after Onslaught, we're kind of playing around with this possibility that Charles Xavier no longer has the ability to access his powers at the moment. But at the same time, even if he did have his powers, for some strange reason, he's not really able to use his powers against Bastion like he wants to, because for some strange reason, it seems like Bastion does not have an actual mind. But now we have to switch over to Generation X. Now, we're going to cover issue number 28. And here's the thing, because I found this kind of weird. You see, for issue number 28, it's not really part of most people's reading order when it comes to Operation Zero Tolerance. But issue number 27 is, and also issue number 29. So, like, I don't know why this issue is left off. But here's the thing, because we're going to go ahead and just sit down and record this issue as well as part of our coverage over Operation Zero Tolerance. Now, issue number 28 really does kind of pick up our last few videos had left off at when it came to Generation X. Because remember, in issue number 25, you have Black Tom being able to attack the school of Charles Xavier, going after Banshee. But you also have Black Tom being able to remove the kids and put them somewhere else. Now, the last time we saw them, the kids were just floating out in the middle of the sea. And we're kind of left to wonder if Banshee and Emma Frost would be able to find the kids in time to save their lives. This is where the story gets a tad bit weird. Because as we dive into the opening pages of issue number 28, we're picking up with Paige Guthrie. Now, for Paige Guthrie, as we all know, better known as Husk, she had been trying her best to prove that she's the best member of the team. But here's the thing, because when she wakes up, she's in a cabin, a ship cabin. And we're kind of left to believe the possibility that, okay, maybe out of nowhere a ship arrived and was able to save the kids who were just floating out there in the middle of the sea. But then she's confronted by Chamber. Now remember, when it came to Chamber, when his powers had manifested, the problem was that it basically blew a hole in his chest, but also got rid of the bottom part of his jaw. But right now, he looks completely normal. And matter of fact, you have him being able to speak normally now, but also being able to play guitar and sing to Husk. And that rather seems like, okay, there's something going on right now when it comes to our characters. And things get even crazier because we now shift over to Sync. And for Sync, apparently, on that same ship, he was able to open up this daycare for different kids in the area. Now, he's also there with Jubilee. This right here really proves that for Sync, he does have feelings for Jubilee, but let's not forget, Jubilee is not there. And the reason why, because when it came to issue number 25, Jubilee was able to get away from Black Tom, but be saved by Bastion, unfortunately. And so currently right now, she's a prisoner for Bastion. And so to see her here, we already know this cannot be real. There's something going on here at the moment. And that trend continues because as we do shift over to Monet, better known as M, it's right now her being able to have lunch with her brother Implate. And let's not forget, for Implate, he was the main bad guy for Generation X. But right now we see him looking completely normal. And the two of them are able to have some time with one another, but continuing to act normal. But here's the thing, because for Implate, he does point out that this part right here is part of Monet's fantasy. And so it kind of left to believe that somebody is being able to bring these characters' wishes to life. Now, there is one character at the moment who's not been given his fantasy. That sounds so weird to say. But anyways, though, that would be Skin. And right now, he's completely normal, but he's chained up at the moment. And we're kind of left to wonder, like, why in the world is Skin chained up here at the moment right now? Now, for a brief moment, we have to shift over to, well, Jubilee, because like I said earlier, she was captured by Bastion. Here's the thing, because we see Jubilee at the moment right now being confronted by Darla. Now, for Darla, she has been working for Bastion the entire time in Operation Zero Tolerance. And so at first, it kind of seemed like she was a minor character, but in almost every single issue that she had appeared in Generation X, she became more and more important, to the point where she feels really bad about the idea of what Bastion is doing to Jubilee. But she also wants to make sure that Jubilee is well fed. The problem is that for Jubilee, she knows that Darla works for Bastion, the man right now who's trying to hunt down mutants across the entire world at the moment. Now, I want to go ahead and shift back over to Skin. And here's the reason why, because for Skin at the moment, he's being confronted by, well, Glorian. I almost said Gideon. By Glorian. Now, when it comes to Glorian, he has this ability to bring people's dreams and fantasies to life. Now, I'm not going to sit down and try to explain the whole idea of this character's backstory because he's not really important for the overall event of Operation Zero Tolerance, but he is the reason why right now for our heroes, they're all being able to live in this fantasy world at the moment. And the reason why Skin is not because Skin had declined his offer. And here's the reason why. Because for Skin, he wants to teach Glorian a lesson. It's him saying that even though you are able to bring people's dreams and fantasies to life, you need to understand that their dreams, their fantasies, does not make them who they are. Like for Husk, for example. For Husk, even though she loves the idea of having someone in her corner like Chamber, she also hates the idea of being taken care of all the time, being cuddled all the time. She's a very independent woman. And so for Skin is him saying like, even though I know I am butt ugly and I wish I had the chance to be normal again, I understand that this is my life now as this person right here, better known as Skin. And so once you have Gideon realize that he's not really able to give Skin the one kind of fantasy he always wanted, it's also still Gideon trying to give Skin at least one wish. And that wish at the moment is to go back home. Now, at that time, he was not thinking of going back home to the school of Charles Xavier. He was thinking about going home to his hometown, and that would be LA. But he was also dreaming about making sure that him and his friends were also safe again. And so you had Glorian go out of his way to teleport Skin and the rest of the members of Generation X over to LA, minus for Jubilee, who's right now still a prisoner for, well, Bastion. Now, there is this backup story that Marvel technically did as a way to kind of bridge this issue into the idea of Operation Zero Tolerance. And the reason why I'm saying that because we do pick up with Banshee and Emma Frost who are right now trying their best to locate their missing students. And when it comes to Banshee, well really when it comes to Emma Frost, she looks into the mind of Banshee to kind of see where this island that he had brought up in the previous video, where he believes the kids could possibly be at when it came to Black Tom taking the kids away from them, because he believes the kids are currently at Krakoa. Now, here's the thing, because back at this time in Marvel Comics, Krakoa was like a dangerous thing for the X-Men. Like, thinking like a giant-sized X-Men #1, you had the X-Men freak out anytime that word was brought up. Now, in current time, when it comes to Krakoa, it's not really a huge bad thing anymore. But anyways, for Banshee, he remembers a time where you had the second X-Men team go out of their way with Cyclops to the first X-Men team on Krakoa. And so he still believes in the idea that there's a possibility the kids are there. Now, this kind of leads into a moment where you have Banshee kind of wonder, like, if the kids' lives would be better if they weren't really around Emma Frost and also Banshee, like, if they never heard of Charles Xavier's school. But the thing is, for Emma Frost, she does not believe that at all, she says, but at the same time, we see her crying, which means, no, she does believe that. But also, she's kind of wondering, like, if the kids are dead, because for me, this is a callback to the idea that when it came to Emma Frost, she had another group of students in the past, better known as the Hellions, that came up around the same time as the New Mutants. By this point in Marvel Comics, most of the Hellions are dead. And Emma Frost, she was in a coma. So she was not really able to protect her last few students in the past. And so now she's kind of worried about the idea this group right here could possibly be dead. But you also have Banshee give her a hug. Now, for a brief moment, it kind of seemed like the two characters were getting somewhat close, right? Like, oh, will Banshee end up with Emma Frost? Because that would be pretty wild. But anyways, you then have the two characters get a call on the radio. Now, technically, this issue right here does take place at the exact same time where you had the X-Men get attacked by Bastion and the different operatives of Operation Zero Tolerance that led the X-Men to that event right there. And so when they get that call, they're kind of like, oh my God, we have to go now and help the X-Men. Now, as we dive into issue number 29 is when we actually get into the idea of like Generation X being part of Operation Zero Tolerance, because now we're picking up with, well, Skin right now having this knife to his neck. And remember, for the kids, they just got to LA because LA is a home to, well, Skin. And so we kind of have to wonder, why in the world is Skin's life in danger already just after he just got back home with all his friends? And so you do have the story basically switch over to the past, kind of show us what led into that moment. Now, with our young heroes being in LA, you do have most of the group right now just taking it in because they love the idea of being in LA because they never been there before. Now for Skin, of course, he has been there because this right here is his hometown, but we also see that for Monet, she's kind of acting different. She's being more friendly, being more open to the different members of the team. And it's also kind of giving us a little more teen drama at the moment because, of course, for Husk, let's not forget, her and Chamber almost got together, but you have Chamber not really showing Husk that she is somebody who can understand, even though he does look different, she still cares for him. But at the same time, he also needs to know that she is very independent. And so she hates the idea of having someone just always there taking care of her. But anyways, though, it's just the kids right now taking everything in. Now, can I say that I realized the last few issues for Sync, his character kind of feels just left out. Like, ever since you had Implate being able to take over his body, that was the last time Sync became important in the entire series so far for Generation X. But anyways, though, you did have Skin say, hey, let's go ahead and head over to my cousin's house to have Sword to stay, but also have Sword to go to contact Banshee and Emma Frost. Now, for Emma Frost and also Banshee, and also really Penance as well, they're currently in hiding at the moment. Now, at the end of the last chapter, we had saw like they were answering the call from the X-Men when needed help when it came to the different operatives of Operation Zero Tolerance going after them at the very beginning of this crossover. But by this point, when they had arrived there, the X-Men were already captured by Bastion. And so for Banshee, Emma Frost, and Penance, they're trying their best to stay undercover. Here's the problem with that, though. Every single home that Emma Frost had across the nation is being currently watched by, well, different people that work for Bastion. So for those three characters, they're trying their best to figure out what is their actual next move. Now, they believe there's still one location left to go to for the time being as a way to hide from Bastion, but also a way to regroup and find their missing students. And really, as we do switch back over to the students, we see that they did arrive at Skin's cousin's house named Gil. Now, when it comes to Gil, he's not really important for the overall X-Men universe. Just a character who is related to Skin, and that's really it. But you do have Gil allowing the kids to, you know, be able to stay there, to have some time to relax. This is where things go south very quickly. And the reason why, because now we jump to the present moment, right? Where it's really more of us seeing why Skin at the very beginning of this chapter had a knife towards his throat because of Torres. Now, we had talked about her before. Torres is a leader of a gang, but on top of that, when it came to Skin, most people in his area, they believed that he was dead. And so there are only a select few people who actually knew that he was alive. Torres was not one of them. She had no idea that he was still alive, well, until a few weeks ago when she was contacted by Operation Zero Tolerance. And so once she heard that Skin was alive, and there was a slim chance that Skin might come back to LA, she knew where Skin would be at. His cousin's house. And so it's her now telling Skin and the rest of the group, like, hey, listen, so I told them where you would be at. And so outside the house, yes, you know it, there are prime sentinels just ready to go once again. So really, when it comes to this issue right here, most of the pages are really more of us just seeing the X-Men, or sorry, not X-Men, Generation X on the run, because right after you didn't have the Prime Sentinels go out of their way to blow up the entire house that belonged to Gil, the cousin to Skin there, well, you didn't have everyone begin to run away. We also learned that for Torres, they say she's also a mutant as well, which also means she has to go. And so you see all the characters just running for their lives across the city and really having no choice but to go ahead and go into the sewers. Now, for Banshee and Emma Frost, they did find somewhere to hide for the moment, but while you had those characters hiding, they're then confronted by DOA. Now, for DOA, he works for Emplate. Let's not forget, Emplate is the brother. He is the brother to Monet. But at the same time, though, when it comes to Emplate, he's the number one bad guy for Generation X. And so he has sent DOA to make a deal with Banshee and Emma Frost, where technically he says, listen, I will go out of my way to find Monet and your missing students for you as well, but you have to give me something in return. And what he wants in return is, of course, penance, because he had penance under his possession for the beginning parts of this series. But of course, you had our young heroes being able to get her away from him, but he still wants her back. And so he said, listen, I'll give you Monet and the rest of your missing students, but I need her back. And so we're kind of left to wonder, is there a possibility they're going to make that deal? Now, the last thing I do want to talk about is the character known as Daria. Now, I realized earlier I called her Darla, but when it comes to Daria, she is this young girl that had been working for Bastion. Now, here's the thing, because for Daria, she tried her best to take care of Jubilee. Jubilee attacks her and tries to escape. The thing is, Daria powers activate. Now, here's the thing though. Is she a mutant? Or is she a Prime Sentinel? Or is she just some person that has some kind of powers? Who knows? Both characters right now are basically confused. But it's also Jubilee wanting to stay with Daria until they're able to figure things out. But either way, for our young heroes right now, they're now part of Operation Zero Tolerance. So the second half of our coverage is going to be the X-Men, Wolverine, and also Generation X. Okay, so getting back into our coverage over Generation X, man. Okay, guys, like I am really hyped to sit down just to cover the first chapter of this video, which is Wolverine issue number 115. Now, here's the thing, because we had covered the first half of Operation Zero Tolerance. Now, I want to say, I don't hate X-Force. I don't hate Cable. I don't even hate Generation X. But the thing is, the main X-Men books are always like the best parts of the actual crossover. And once again, for me personally, this was amazing. Like, if I had to say like what came first in the order of like which team or which solo book did the best when it came to Operation Zero Tolerance, it's Wolverine / X-Men, and then Cable second. And then possibly X-Force, and then dead last Generation X. But anyways, getting into Wolverine issue number 115, we do pick up with the idea where our last video left off at when it came to the main X-Men team, where we saw Wolverine, Jean Grey, Cyclops, and also Wolverine get captured by Bastion. Now, that's probably how this crossover where we couldn't really sit down and pick back up these characters until we sat down and covered Cable and X-Force and their part in Operation Zero Tolerance. But anyways, the last time we saw these four characters were at the very beginning of this event, and they were captured by Bastion. Now, here's the thing, because Jubilee, she was captured before the actual event had kicked off over in Generation X. And so she has been a prisoner of Bastion for a very long time by this point in the crossover. And for Bastion, he has been trying his best to play mind games on her. Like, hey, listen, I killed off the X-Men. I have Wolverine. He's my prisoner. And the reason why, because he was kind of hoping to dig into her mind with different tech he has to kind of learn more about the X-Men. But the opening pages of this chapter is him showing her the actual footage of him having the X-Men. He has Jean Grey. He has Cyclops. He has Cannonball. but he especially has Wolverine. Now, at first, she believes that this is another trick. But the thing is Wolverine holding on to Jean Grey? And that shows Jubilee like, no, that is the real Wolverine. He would do anything to protect Jean Grey. Even though she's married to Cyclops, again, he still loves her. And he would do anything to protect her. Now, for Bastion, he believes that he won. Like, for his mindset, look, I have the X-Men, I have Jubilee. Both schools are officially locked down. We're hunting down Banshee, Emma Frost. X-Force right now is on the run. Like, for Bastion, everything right now is going up for him. And so for Charles, he's watching his X-Men be transported to different parts of this facility that Bastion had taken over. Now, when it comes to Bastion, he believes that Logan is possibly dead because at the end of our last video for X-Men, you had Logan go out of his way to protect Jean Grey, but got seriously injured. But the thing is, Logan's not dead. We know that. The dude has a healing factor. And so at the very last second, when it does seem like, okay, this could be the possibly end for Logan, he wakes up and this begins the breakout for the X-Men. Because once you have Wolverine being able to break free, it's now him going out of his way to get the rest of his crew. Cyclops, Jean Grey, Cannonball, and Storm. Now, he does not free Jubilee because it does seem like he does not know that Jubilee is there as well because Jubilee is at the moment with Bastion. But once you do have Logan being able to free the rest of the X-Men, it's now they're using their powers as a way to fight to the front door, to get the heck out of that facility. Now, the front door is completely blocked in many different ways where the different powers of our X-Men are not really going to be able to break it open. But the thing is, Jubilee is there. And with her being in the room with Bastion, she's watching right now what the X-Men are currently doing. And so for Jubilee, she knows the best way to help the X-Men to bring down Bastion is to get the X-Men the heck out of there. And so you have Jubilee go out of her way to hit the button to open up the door. And so once it does open up, the X-Men do now have the ability to try to escape. And really, that's the whole idea of issue number 115. It's the X-Men breaking out of their supposed prison, but now trying to begin the process of possibly bringing down Bastion. Now, I kind of want to go ahead and shift over to X-Men issue number 67. Here's the reason why, because we're now picking up with a character we have not really talked about on the channel, and that will be a character known as Sabra. Now, when it comes to Sabra, she was really more of a Hulk character for a good while there. Then she kind of disappeared. But when it comes to this character, she is a mutant. So, of course, she's now getting involved in this crazy event better known as Operation Zero Tolerance. Now, when it comes to Sabra, she is part of the Israeli Secret Service, and matter of fact, the first superhuman agent. But when it comes to her character, we see her right now downloading information about Operation Zero Tolerance. Now, here's the thing, because this brings up the whole idea of what I said earlier. When it came to Bastion and also Operation Zero Tolerance, he made sure to get the backing of different governments across the world, not just the United States of America. And so for her country, she had found some very vital information about Operation Zero Tolerance, and her main goal is to get that info over to the X-Men. Now, right after you had her be able to download the information, she's then confronted by other agents who say like, hey, listen, it's time for you to basically talk to the boss. But in reality, no, these other agents are really more prime sentinels that were sent out of their way to bring her down, but to also get that information that she had just downloaded. Now, when it comes to Sabra, you do have her being able to get rid of those prime sentinels very easily. And so she does kind of leave the book for a very short period of time, because in our next video, we're going to see her again, another chapter of Operation Zero Tolerance. But when it comes to X-Men issue number 67, we now switch over to Iceman and also Nurse Reyes. And really, I should call her Dr. Reyes, not Nurse Reyes. But for Dr. Reyes, she had appeared for the first time in the last chapter in our coverage over the X-Men, where she was a mutant that Charles Xavier had met in the past. And matter of fact, the dude wanted her on the X-Men. She said no. But he did promise her, like, I'll make sure that you're well protected in a way where nobody should be able to find you. Of course, that didn't work out. She was found, but luckily at the very last second, she was saved by Iceman. And so for Bobby and her, their main goal is to find somewhere safe. And for Bobby, he believes that he knows somebody that could possibly help him. Now, while you have the two characters walking around, they don't realize they're being watched from the sewers, and that would be Marrow. Now, we saw her in an earlier chapter when it came to Uncanny X-Men as she fought against Spider-Man, but now she's on a different goal. But for Bobby and also Dr. Reyes, they went over to the home of Warren Warrington, hoping that he would be home, but also kind of help them with their mission. The problem is that for Warren, he's not really part of this event for a different reason, and neither is Psylocke. There was a small miniseries called The Crimson Dawn that took place, I want to say, around the same time as this event. But anyways, though, when you do have the two characters walk into his apartment, they're then confronted by a character known as Angie, who was apparently hired to house sit for Archangel while he was gone. Now, I kind of want to shift over to Bastion and also Charles Xavier. Now, their conversation does take place prior to the first chapter that we had just covered in this video, Wolverine number 115. But when it comes to their conversation, it's really more Bastion trying to see if there is a possibility that Charles' powers had returned, because remember, at the end of Onslaught, he had supposedly lost his powers. Now for Charles, he already says no, but it's also Charles reminding us that they have been watching over Bastion and collecting data about him, and they know that no psychic is really able to dive into the mind of Bastion. But it's also Charles saying, like, Bastion, I kind of feel like the reason why you constantly keep asking me about the idea of my powers because you're kind of hoping I will use my powers to basically stop you. Now, it's also Charles pointing out that when it comes to Bastion, he's not human. Now, once Charles says that, Bastion gets angry. He's like, no, I am more human than you are. It's kind of like for Bastion, he does not really understand like why he's trying so hard to kill off the mutant race, like where that hatred is coming from. But also it's kind of like, wait, why does Charles believe this man is not human? Now, as we do switch over to Bobby and Dr. Reyes, for Bobby at the moment, it's him trying to call in Excalibur to get some backup. The problem is Excalibur is not answering. So once again, for Excalibur, they're not part of this good old crossover. Now, with that being said, we also learn here that Angie is not really a house sitter for Warren. She's actually an undercover Prime Sentinel that was sent there to kill off, well, anybody who enters the apartment. And right now, that's Bobby and also Dr. Reyes. Now, she did put something in Bobby's drink that basically cancels out his powers. And so for Dr. Reyes, she has to use her shields as a way to protect her, but to also protect him. Now, at the very last second, they do get saved by Detective Jones. Now, for Jones, she was somewhat close to Archangel. That was her connection to the X-Men, but it does seem like she knew something would possibly pop off, so she was able to grab Bobby and also Dr. Reyes and bring her back over to the precinct. Now, even though you had Detective Jones go out of her way to save Bobby and also Reyes, the reason why she has saved them is to hand them over to some police officers who are also turning to Prime Sentinels as well, because they had abducted her son. And so her goal is to get her son back. But the only way to do that was to give up Bobby and also Dr. Reyes, which of course she did. And so as this chapter closes, it's Bobby right now realizing that they're currently in another trap. But luckily for Bobby, it does seem like he might get some help, and that help will be Marrow. But now we have to switch over to Generation X issue number 30. Now, this storyline is kind of picking up in two different ways. And let me explain. Because in our last video, we saw Emma Frost and Banshee be confronted by DOA. And DOA is a guy who works for Emplate, number one bad guy for Generation X. Now, when it came to Emplate, he basically offered Emma Frost and also Banshee a deal. If they hand over Penance, he'll tell them where they can find their missing students. That leads into the second storyline we covered a while back, where you have Black Tom go out of his way to attack the school. When he did that, he basically kidnapped the kids and placed them out in the middle of the ocean. Now, the kids were able to find their way back to the mainlands, matter of fact, over to LA, but for Emma Frost and Banshee, they don't know that. They have no idea where the kids could possibly be at. And so as we dive into the opening pages of this storyline, it's really more of Emma Frost and Banshee actually arguing about the idea of possibly handing over Penance to Emplate. Now for Banshee, he says no. But for Emma Frost, it's kind of like, no, we should go ahead and do it. Like, one kid can get us the rest of the kids back. Now, as we all know, for Emplate, it's somebody you cannot trust. And for Banshee, it's kind of like, no, because Penance is still their student as well. And speaking of Generation X, you have them right now on the run, because in our last video, when you had our young hero get to LA, you had Skin take everyone over to his cousin's house, except somebody else he knows, better known as Torres, who runs a gang in that area. She was very upset about the idea that Skin was alive because she believed that he had died many years ago. And so because of that, she told the Prime Sentinels where most likely he would pop up at, his cousin's house. The thing is, she had no idea that she was also a mutant as well, apparently. And so for the Prime Sentinels, they began to attack everyone in that house. And so currently they're on the run. Now they were able to hide in this old warehouse that's full of cars. Now here's the thing, because you also have relationships be built here in this moment. For example, that would be Chamber and also Husk. Now for these two characters, they have always gone back and forth where it's like, will they, won't they? Really, a lot of times it has been Chamber's fault, but it's now him kind of realizing that he should just try to be himself, but also open up to Husk. Allow her in because she does want to be with him. Now, in our last video, I did not mention this maybe, but when it came to Skin and also Husk, they were talking outside. And so for Chamber, he believed that they were secretly getting together, but in reality, they're just friends. But anyways, though, you have Monet say, dude, get back over there and get the girl that you love so much. And so, of course, he does the right thing. Except while you had everyone, getting along and becoming a couple together, they realized the Prime Sentinels are basically in that area trying to figure out where our young heroes are at. Now, they don't know where, like, hey, they're in that building, but sooner or later, they're gonna find out. Now we do switch over to Jubilee. Now for Jubilee, she was captured a long time ago when it comes to our coverage over Operation Zero Tolerance. If I remember correctly, she was captured right after Black Tom had attacked the school of Generation X. But anyways, though, when it comes to Jubilee, we have been seeing her in X-Men books, but also in Generation X books. Now, in the Generation X books, we have been seeing her being able to befriend one of the assistants that work for Bastion, and that would be Daria. And I really hope I pronounce her name correctly. But when it comes to Daria, for her, she's just a young girl who works for Bastion, but apparently has powers. Now, we don't know technically if she is a mutant or if she is a Prime Sentinel, but for Daria, it's her beginning to feel bad for Jubilee. And for Jubilee, that's a good thing because she can then use Daria as a way to escape. But as we do switch back over to Emma Frost and also Banshee, you still have the two characters arguing, but you have Emma Frost knock out Banshee so that she'll then be able to make that deal with DOA. Now, for DOA, he has been trying his best in this entire issue right here, trying to fix his communicator to allow him to talk to, well, Emplate. The problem is it's still not working. So even though you had Emma Frost knock out Banshee to make that deal with Emplate, we kind of have to wait on that at the moment. Now, we do switch back over to Jubilee one last time for this issue because you have Daria kind of switch sides here. She realized that it's really bad to see Jubilee like this. It's really bad to see how Bastion is treating mutants across the world. And so for Daria, her main goal at the moment is to get Jubilee the heck out of there. So the next issue is a breakout time for Jubilee and Daria. But as we begin to close on this video, one last time we switch over to Generation X. And before you have the Prime Sentinels being able to find our young heroes and attack them, you have Sync get a kiss from Monet. And I have to talk about this because for Sync, like I said, guys, in the last few videos, Sync kind of felt like a nobody character. I don't know why. Like, you had a lot of different things happen in the books in the last few storylines that we had covered. And for Sync, he was just there, barely having any lines for me personally. And so you have Sync right now getting some lines where it's like, dude, we're going to die. And here's the thing. If we die, it's going to suck because I never had a girlfriend. I never had a kiss. And so you have Monet make a deal with Sync to give him that kiss so that he knows what it's like to have one. And so right after that, the book closes on the note where the Prime Sentinels are beginning their attack. Okay, so it's time for us to go ahead and get back into our coverage over Operation Zero Tolerance. Man, okay, so we're going to cover Wolverine issue number 116. Now, here's the thing about this issue because we kind of do learn the secret behind the Prime Sentinels, but not the complete secret about them. It's just really the idea of where they come from. Now, with that being said, when it comes to this issue, it does pick up where our last video left off at for the X-Men. You see, for the X-Men, they're currently on the run because in our last video, they were able to escape from Bastion's base. Now, with the X-Men being on the run, they found this nearby camp out in the middle of the desert. Now, this camp is made of different people who are kind of going through different things when it comes to different types of injuries or medical needs. Now, when they do arrive at the camp, they're then confronted by a character known as Mustang. Now, for Mustang, like the other people at the camp, he is disabled from a recent injury involving a plane crash. And so when he does arrive, he does tell the X-Men like, hey, listen, I can't really tell if you are bad or good, but the thing is, I am blind. But for Mustang, he kind of feels like he can trust the X-Men and he begins to try to take care of them by giving them food and also a warm fire to sit by to kind of warm up at the moment. Now, when it comes to Mustang, he was also kind of able to realize that Wolverine and the rest of the X-Men are mutants because when they first arrived, you had Wolverine use his nose as a way to learn if the possibility that Mustang might be a Prime Sentinel. But on top of that, when it came to Jean Grey, she also tried to read his mind and make sure that he was someone they could trust. And so he felt Jean Grey in his mind, but also realized Wolverine had used his nose to figure out what's going on with Mustang. Because again, for Mustang, he was in that severe plane crash. And so with that plane crash happening, it left his body pretty damaged. And so he had a lot of work done over the years. He has metal inside of him and also metal on him as well. Now, this is where we kind of learn a tad bit more about this camp. Because I kind of said it earlier, with the idea of this camp being made up by different people who have different types of medical needs, there is a nearby clinic, a nearby doctor. Now, this doctor goes out of his way to help the folks out the best he can. The thing is, for Wolverine, as soon as everyone goes to sleep, you have Wolverine sneak away. And honestly, there's a good thing he did because the actual clinic is not really a clinic. You see, that clinic is really more a base being used at the moment to help create Prime Sentinels. And so all the different people at this camp right now, they have been going over there over time for many different types of visits, but each visit is really more of them slowly turning into a Prime Sentinel. Now for Mustang, for somebody who is blind, he never saw mutants technically, but also the idea of Prime Sentinels is Jean Grey feeding him information so that he knows what is truthfully going on. Because at first, he kind of believes like, oh wait, you're telling me there is some factory out there that's turning people into robots, but giving them the chance to be able to walk again, or see again, or fly for the first time. But in reality, no. You're losing your human side, becoming a cyborg, and working for this guy known as Bastion to hunt down mutants across the nation. And so once you have Mustang realize that technically him being at this camp is not going to really help him, he begins to freak out. But the problem is, for the X-Men, they realize there's some aircrafts right now heading that way, and of course looking for our heroes. Now when it comes to Mustang, he does help our heroes out here by basically guiding them into this underground tunnel. Now for our heroes, while being down there, they can't be seen nor detected by the aircrafts that are currently being used by Operation Zero Tolerance. Now for Logan, he's still looking out the trap door, and he realized that it's now Mustang going out of his way to try to warn the other campers who are currently right now on a bus heading over to that factory to be turned into Prime Sentinels. But the problem is, when it comes to Bastion, he wants to find the X-Men badly. And he says, hey, listen, that camp right now is what we're using to make more and more Prime Sentinels. But here's the thing, I need you right now to go ahead and activate at least 3 of them down there to hopefully find our missing targets. Of course, he's talking about the X-Men. But now we have to switch over to Senator Kelly and also Henry Gyrich. Now here's the thing, because man, for these two characters, they kind of gone out of their way to support Bastion at first when it came to his idea of using Operation Zero Tolerance to go after different mutants in America. But now you kind of realize that was a huge mistake, because now you are talking about the idea of innocent people who may or may not know they are mutants just being attacked, captured, or possibly killed by Bastion and his army of Prime Sentinels. And so for Senator Kelly, he tells Henry like, okay, it's now time for us to shut down Operation Zero Tolerance. So go ahead and call in S.H.I.E.L.D. And so it does seem like we're getting very close to the idea of Bastion being shut down and the mutants possibly being saved by Senator Kelly. But now we have to switch over to X-Men issue number 68. Now, with this issue, really when it came to the X-Men book around this time for Operation Zero Tolerance, really did focus more on 2 characters, Bobby Drake, better known as Iceman, and Dr. Reyes. Now, here's the thing, these 2 characters, they've been technically on the run for a moment now when it came to the Prime Sentinels trying to hunt them down. Now, in our last video, you had Detective Jones, someone who used to date Archangel, also a close ally for the X-Men, take the 2 over to the police department. Now, here's the thing, because the reason why she did that, it was her trying to get her son back. But the problem was that she basically set up Bobby and also Dr. Reyes to be hunted down and killed by police officers who had been turned into Prime Sentinels. But as we get into the opening pages of this storyline, or this issue number 68, we're picking up with Marrow. Now for Marrow, man, Marrow was somewhat popular around this time in Marvel Comics. You see, for her character, she led Gene Nation, the second or possibly third generation of the Morlocks who came back to the main Marvel universe to kill off the human race. Now, in a recent chapter of Operation Zero Tolerance, you really have Spider-Man being able to get to her, to begin the process of her possibly turning into a better person. And the reason why I'm saying that, because with her right now attacking this police department, it's not really her going out of her way to kill the police officers. She only knocks them out. But as we do switch over to Dr. Reyes and also Bobby Drake, those 2 characters had currently been stuck in this interrogation room for a good while. Now, when it comes to Bobby, he realized that they have been officially set up. He has no idea that technically for Detective Jones, the reason why she did set them up because she's trying to get her son back from the Prime Sentinels. And so you do have Bobby and also Dr. Reyes be attacked by some police officers who are technically, Prime Sentinels. Now, when it comes to our two heroes, they're trying to escape. The problem is that they run into some regular police officers kind of wondering what in the what is going on. And so for our heroes, they're kind of stuck in the middle of both different parties, the regular police officers and the Prime Sentinels. Now, in the last part of this video, we had saw that for Senator Kelly and also for Henry Gyrich, they're now beginning the process of trying to shut down Operation Zero Tolerance. But at this point, it's really more them about to have that meeting to hopefully get it shut down. And the reason why, because for, not Henry Gyrich, for Senator Kelly, it's really more of him kind of comparing what's happening right now to the Holocaust. It's the whole idea that you technically have a guy right now just going after a race of people because he has some kind of hatred for them. And the problem is you now have the American government supporting the whole idea of them going after just one race of people. And so right now it's him saying like, we are technically helping a guy who's very similar to Hitler to just kill off a race of people because he has some kind of hatred for them, but also because only a small group of them is technically bad apples, but not the entire race. And so we do see Kelly right now going into that meeting to hopefully get it shut down. Now, you do have the book quickly shift back over to Bobby and also Dr. Reyes. I kind of like this because it's really more the book saying like, okay, these two characters right now are the main focus, but also it's Dr. Reyes kind of getting better with coming to using her powers to protect herself, but to also protecting Bobby Drake as well. And so while you do have the two characters working together, it's them now slowly becoming a team with one another. But while you have the two characters trying their best to get the heck out of the police department building, you did have them be confronted again by a couple more Prime Sentinels. Now, luckily for the two, Detective Jones realized that what she did, setting up Bobby and also Dr. Reyes, was completely wrong, and is now her trying her best to make it better by trying to help them get the heck out of there, but still have the chance to get her son back. Now, unfortunately, for good old Detective Jones, she does get injured as well. But luckily for her, she has Dr. Reyes there to begin the process of patching her up. Now, we do switch over to a character known as Sabra. Now, when it came to Sabra, she was part of the Israeli Special Forces, but she had downloaded some information about Operation Zero Tolerance. Her main goal was to get it over to the X-Men, and so she just arrived in Connecticut, getting the chance to hopefully find the X-Men to hand that information over. But we can just go ahead and quickly move back over to Bobby and also Dr. Reyes. And when we do, it's really more the two characters right now realizing that for Detective Jones, her son has been taken. Now, they kind of care. Meryl does not. And matter of fact, when she walks in, she makes it very clear that she does not care about that missing child. Because again, that child is a human, not a mutant. But anyways, for Bobby, he kind of realized this right here is not the best place for them at the moment to kind of have this conversation because, again, they don't know how many more Prime Sentinels could be in the building. But while you do have the three characters leave, they realize that as soon as they left that building, they had stepped into another ambush just full of different kinds of Prime Sentinels coming after our heroes at the moment. But the very last page of this chapter truly does reveal the idea that the young boy that belongs to Detective Jones, he is alive, but right now he's kind of a prisoner. But he believes that apparently his mom has gone deep undercover supposedly to earn a lot of money. And that closes this issue. Now, we dive into the one issue I was kind of hyped to cover because this right here basically opens up the doors to the idea of the origin, the secrets to Monet. Like, what is the full origin about her character? Because, well, you know what? You'll see at the very end of this video. But as we get into issue number 31 for Generation X, we're basically now picking up with our young heroes still fighting against the Prime Sentinel. Because remember, when it came to this storyline for Operation Zero Tolerance, for our young heroes, it it's technically continuing a storyline that took place back in issue number 25, where you had Black Tom go out of his way to put the kids out in the middle of the sea. Now, with that happening, they ran into a character known as Glorian. Now, when it came to Glorian, his big idea was to hopefully bring people's dreams to life. And so when it came to Skin, he said the only thing he wanted was to go back home, but to also see his friends that are with him well protected. And so for our young heroes, they were then transported over to LA. And so while being in LA and trying their best to hide, but also get some help, they ran into the Prime Sentinels. Now, there are a couple of characters here that could be somewhat important, but for the sake of Operation Zero Tolerance, I'm only going to focus on the main characters. Now, with that being said, it's just our heroes trying their best right now to technically survive here. But the problem is that you didn't have the young mutants get a tad bit too cocky, because for them, they're winning the battle against the Prime Sentinels. Because for them, they're like, listen, we have been trained by Banshee and Emma Frost for a good few months now. We know how to handle ourselves. But the problem is that there is an army of Prime Sentinels. And also, they're getting too cocky. And so one by one, each member of Generation X is being defeated. Now, luckily for Skin's cousin, his plan does go off. The entire building does blow up. And we're kind of left to wonder like, okay, did they survive? But also, did the Prime Sentinels survive as well? But as we do switch back over to Emma Frost and Banshee, for those two characters, they were confronted by DOA and M-Plate in the last video. And those two characters, they wanted to make a deal with Emma Frost and Banshee like, hey, listen, if you hand over Penance, we'll tell you where the rest of your kids are at. Now, for Banshee, he said no. Emma Frost said yes. And so you had Emma Frost knock out Banshee and begun the process of actually handing Penance over to M-Plate and DOA. Now, at the very last second in this chapter, you have Banshee being able to get rid of DOA and M-Plate, save Penance's life, but it's also Emma Frost kind of getting upset. But it's also her pleading, saying like, listen, I was not going to for real hand over Penance to M-Plate. But the thing is, for Banshee, it did seem like she was going to. Now, this begins the process of us kind of ending the book when it comes to Generation X and their part in Operation Zero Tolerance. And the reason why, because we jump over to Jubilee and you have Daria going out of her way to help Jubilee escape from Bastion's base. Now, with Jubilee now being free, you also have Daria make sure that all the attention is on her, so Jubilee can still get away. Now, with that being said, this is technically the last issue for Operation Zero Tolerance for Generation X, because right after you have Jubilee being able to get away, because now we switch back over to Generation X, because earlier we saw the building got blown up as a way to hopefully kill off the Prime Sentinels, but to also give our heroes a way to escape. The thing is, they find Sync first, and we're like, okay, cool, Sync's alive. What about the rest of the team? You have Sync go out of his way to pull up Monet. This is the big part right here, because we do learn Monet is not really just Monet, meaning that it's not just one person. It's two young girls, twins, who are able to combine together to make Monet. The mysterious origin for this character, M-Plate's character, and Penance's character continues on. And it's kind of like, oh my gosh, getting a small headache here. But anyways, for Generation X, this was their last chapter in Operation Zero Tolerance. The next time we see them is outside of this event. Okay, so we are now at the very end of Operation Zero Tolerance. Like, these next 3 issues are really what wraps up the entire event for us. And then we technically move on to the next X-Men crossover. Now, with that being said, we're going to cover Wolverine issue number 117 to kind of kick off today's video. And of course, it does pick up the last chapter left off at when it came to Wolverine in the X-Men, because in issue number 116, you basically had our heroes being able to find this camp after being able to escape from Bastion's base. Now, once they did find this camp and run into a guy known as Mustang, they had learned that this camp was built by people who had different kinds of medical needs. The thing was, every single person at that camp was going to the same clinic to get their medical help. The problem was that that facility, that clinic, was not really a clinic. It was a facility that was currently being used as a way to slowly turn those people into Prime Sentinels. Now, at the very end of that chapter, you have some Prime Sentinels being able to find the X-Men in that area. And so you have Mustang, one of the guys who's part of that camp, help the X-Men get into an underground tunnel. The problem was that he didn't begin to tell every single person at that camp what was really happening to them. They weren't getting any kind of medical help. Instead, they were slowly turning into hunting robots to hunt down, of course, the X-Men and other mutants across the world. And so as we dive into 117, we literally pick up the idea of Mustang saying like, guys, listen, I'm telling you the truth. They're slowly turning us into hunting robots, and he takes those people over to where the X-Men were hiding at. The problem is that some of those people were already so far down the process, as soon as you have Bastion say, I need more Prime Sentinels out there to find the X-Men, some of those people, they had turned into what? Prime Sentinels and began to attack the X-Men. Now, for the ones who have not gone completely over, they're freaking out because they have gone to that clinic. They have been slowly changed, been given different kinds of cybernetic body parts to begin their process. And so once you do have the X-Men being able to take down all those different Prime Sentinels, this kind of leads into a small debate because you have some folks who are okay with the idea of turning into Prime Sentinels. And the reason why, because again, all of these different people have different kinds of medical needs. They're blind, their legs don't work anymore, or they might be just having MS. Who knows what's going on with them? But the idea of having a chance to see again, walk again, or use an arm or a leg or whatever, it's like, man, that would be so great. But it's Mustang saying, but is it worth the idea of losing your soul? And so that right there is kind of small debate between those people right there. But for the X-Men, they got to go. They have to go to that facility and basically shut it down because it will continue to build more and more Prime Sentinels. Now, by this point in the story, Bastion is freaking out for two reasons. One, because you have S.H.I.E.L.D. right now be activated by Senator Kelly and also by Henry Gyrich to go after Bastion and also the different members of Operation Zero Tolerance, because it's Senator Kelly realizing now what he did was completely wrong. He basically compared Operation Zero Tolerance over to the Holocaust. And he hated the idea of innocent people who may be mutants or not being attacked by some hunting robots who may believe they could be mutants or not. But either way, you had the American government realize, okay, you know what? We're in the wrong. Go ahead, activate S.H.I.E.L.D. to go ahead and shut down Bastion and also Operation Zero Tolerance. Now, we also have to remember that there is a mutant known as Sabra who's came from Israel over to America with some vital information about Bastion and also the operation as well. And so he wants to find her and basically bring her down as well. Now he also calls up the doctor who runs that supposed clinic that turns people into Prime Sentinels. He said, hey, listen, go all out. Like, go ahead and build as many as you can because we need all hands on deck. And so for the doctor, he's okay with that idea. Now, the X-Men are the only ones out there in the middle of the desert. We also have to remember about Jubilee because when it came to Generation X, she was a prisoner of Bastion before anybody else was when it came to the X-Men. Now, she also helped the X-Men escape from the Hulkbuster base that Bash is working out of. But recently in the Generation X comics, she was able to break away. And so right now, it's just her just wandering in the desert, hoping she'll find some kind of help. Which, lucky for her, she's going to get that help because while you have the X-Men beginning to plan out their plan to attack the facility that's making the Prime Sentinels, you have Logan just leave. And the reason why, because with the wind blowing, he had picked up on the scent of Jubilee and realized she needs some help. Now, unfortunately for Jubilee, she does run into a Prime Sentinel. But luckily for Jubilee, she does get saved by Wolverine. Now, I kind of like this a lot because when it came to Jubilee, when she first appeared in Marvel Comics, at first the X-Men had no idea that she was in their Australian base. But when it came to her and Logan, they were then able to build a tight bond with one another. And matter of fact, for a good portion of Wolverine comics, it was Wolverine and Jubilee, kind of like Batman and Robin. But the thing was, for Wolverine and Jubilee, they have built this tight bond where it's kind of like, for me personally, a father and daughter bond. But either way, it's nice to see the two characters being able to reunite with one another. Now, once you do have Wolverine and Jubilee being able to get back with the rest of the X-Men, by that point, the X-Men and also a few people from the trailer park were able to tear down the entire facility. Now, while you do have the X-Men walking around and trying their best to find any more information about Bastion, but also the idea of Operation Zero Tolerance, for Bastion, he begins to freak out. And the reason why, because he now knows that his other base has been, well, attacked. And so for him, he needs to release the one Prime Sentinel that has higher grade weapons and should be able to bring down the X-Men. The problem is that that one Prime Sentinel is no other than Mustang, the guy we saw earlier who had actually helped the X-Men when they had first arrived at that camp. Now, unfortunately, they must fight against him. And so as we dive into Wolverine issue number 118, we're really getting into the idea of us seeing Wolverine, Cyclops, and also Cannonball kind of wondering what to do here when it comes to, well, Mustang, because he's now a Prime Sentinel. And with him being a Prime Sentinel at the moment, that means most likely he's going to try to kill off our heroes. And matter of fact, he does try to do that. Now, for Logan, he does try to reason with Mustang to hopefully help him regain control of his body. The problem is for Mustang, he can't do it. He is completely right now being controlled by Bastion. So you have Logan say, Cannonball, Cyclops, go outside, I'll stay behind and try my best to reason with the guy, to hopefully bring him back over to our side. But while you do have Cyclops and Cannonball continue to help out Storm and also Jean Grey get the rest of the people outside the facility, you then have Storm realize that, hey, guys, here comes an army of Prime Sentinels at the moment, and most likely they might be coming after us. But I want to go ahead and shift back over to Wolverine trying his best to reason with Mustang, because at first it's not really working. The control of Bastion is just too strong. What happens next, though, is that you have Jubilee appear, because for Jubilee, once she heard that Logan was left behind with a Prime Sentinel, she freaked out. She went back inside there. When she does use her powers on basically Mustang's eyes, it makes him realize that he can see again. Because remember, for Mustang, he was blind. And so with the idea of him now seeing, it helps him kind of fight against the control that Bastion has on him. So it's slowly turning Mustang onto the side of good. But on the outside, we do see that technically that army of Sentinels are not trying to come after the X-Men. Instead, they're on the run, because what's happening right now, the American government said, okay, you know what? We were in the wrong. Go ahead, activate S.H.I.E.L.D. and have S.H.I.E.L.D. kick out Bastion, because even though he did have many countries backing when it came to the idea of targeting mutants, they all kind of realized what they're doing right now against the mutant race is completely wrong. And so you have S.H.I.E.L.D. right now just going after Bastion and also his Prime Sentinels all over the nation. Now, with that being said, one of them does detect Cyclops and wants to fight against Cyclops. Now, for Scott, he tries his best to reason with this one particular Prime Sentinel. The problem is that, one, his attack missed, and two, his plan does not work out at all. And so, unfortunately, Scott is hit, and we're kind of left to wonder, is Scott going to die? We already know he's not going to, but like, for the sake of the story, it's like, oh my God, Scott Summers might die. But this kind of leads into, for me personally, the ending for Operation Zero Tolerance on one side, because this is just the last issue for Wolverine in Operation Zero Tolerance. But we still have one more issue when it comes to the X-Men, when it comes to Operation Zero Tolerance. But anyways, though, when it comes to Cyclops, you didn't have the medic team for S.H.I.E.L.D. realize that there's something inside of him. Now, we do kind of skip over a few pages. You do have the X-Men being able to get a jet to go back home. You also have Mustang stay behind to hopefully find a way to get rid of his problem at the moment, being a prime sentinel. But while you have the X-Men on their way home, you have Scott kind of realized that, really the entire X-Men realized that when they were captured by Bastion earlier, they had implanted some kind of bomb in Scott Summers. And the question is right now, is Scott going to survive? The thing is, we now have to shift back over to the main X-Men book. And so now we have to dive into X-Men issue number 69. Now, this is the final chapter for Operation Zero Tolerance. Now, when it came to X-Men chapters, they really did focus more on Iceman, Marrow, and also, a character known as Dr. Reyes. Now, there were really only one chapter for Uncanny X-Men because the Uncanny X-Men team were currently out in space at the moment. But anyways, for this X-Men team, they were basically surrounded by an army of Prime Sentinels at the end of the last chapter. But as we dive into the opening pages of this chapter, we're seeing our heroes right now about to meet up with a character known as Sabra. And so we're kind of left to wonder, how in the world did our heroes escape that last situation? Well, we do get a flashback here. And with this flashback, we basically learn how our heroes were able to escape. It was all because of Sabra. Now, we had talked about her character in our last two videos. When it comes to Sabra, she's from Israel, and she's part of the Israeli Secret Service. And the thing is, her Secret Service had been gathering information about Bastion to basically use against him. And so when the time came to use that info against him, she had downloaded the information and traveled all the way over to, America to meet up with the X-Men. And so when it came to the X-Men, Iceman, Dr. Reyes, and also Marrow being completely surrounded by all these Prime Sentinels, she was then able to meet up with them, but basically help them out to get out of that situation. But now we have to switch over to Senator Kelly and also, Henry Gyrich. Now, for these two characters, they have been trying their best to get Operation Zero Tolerance shut down. Their main goal is to make sure that Bastion cannot win here. And technically he won't. But here's the thing, because for those two characters, they went over to the government and got their approval to shut down the operation, but it also used S.H.I.E.L.D. to go after Bastion. Now, for Senator Kelly, for a good while there, he kind of felt like the mutant race should be contained. The mutant race should be handled in some type of way. But then it's kind of he realized what a huge mistake he made when it came to him trying to allow Bastion to kill off the mutant race. But either way, it's now S.H.I.E.L.D. going after, Bastion. But getting back over to our heroes, you do have our heroes arrive to this home. Now, this home is where Detective Jones' son was being held at, as we saw at the end of the last chapter, but we also saw some older woman holding on to him as well. Well, we learned that technically this is Bastion's mother. Now, here's the thing, because once he had learned that Sabra was on her way over to America, he was kind of nope, we got to stop that right now because she's going after my mother. Now, here's the thing. If you believe that in this chapter right here, we were going to sit down and actually talk about the origin of Bastion, you are wrong, because in this issue, it's not given to us. There's only hints about the idea of his origin. And the thing is, his origin is told to us in a Machine Man Bastion Annual 98 issue that we may cover, because it does give us the actual origin of Bastion here. Just know that Bastion had technically been around for a good while because of a combination of two other characters from a previous storyline. But either way, when the heroes arrive at that home, they do find Bastion. They do find Detective Jones' missing son. They do find Bastion's mother. But this leads into Iceman fighting against Bastion. Now, for Bastion, it's him once again trying to explain like why he did all of this for, and trying to say like it was his mother's teaching, even though apparently she's saying that he took her teachings in a different direction. But either way, for Iceman, he's kind of like, look at you. Like you truly believed that an entire nation would turn their back on the idea of another race out there being killed off, similar to the Holocaust. And it's also Iceman saying like, I've been waiting for this for a long time. Now, for me personally, this crossover is not the best. Like out of all the 90s crossovers, it might be one of the lowest ones. But at the same time, it does pay off the Iceman storyline that kind of picked up prior to the crossover. Because when it came to Bobby Drake, he went undercover to hopefully bring down Graydon Creed. But his father got severely injured because, well, his father did talk back to Creed. But anyways, for Bobby, he had to watch his father relearn how to walk again, how to do different things again. And so for Bobby, he hated the idea that there were people out there who hated him so much they went after his family members who were technically human. But either way, is Bobby right now getting his lick back by beating down on Bastion and saying like, you believe that you're doing the right thing, but right now you're an evil person. And look at your prime sentinels. These were innocent people who may or may not have any idea that they were being basically taken over by you for some kind of war against the mutant race. And the thing is, Bobby is right, because if you think back to the last few chapters we covered for Wolverine, you have that camp of random people who were believing that, hey, you know what? There's a clinic nearby. They're going to make me better. But in reality, they weren't. They were going to that clinic and slowly being turned into prime sentinels. Now, while you have Bobby fighting against Bastion, the battle is stopped, thankfully, by S.H.I.E.L.D. arriving to take Bastion away, because the American government said no more. You are no longer allowed to do anything at all on the American soil. And the thing is, that's the end. Like literally, that's the end of this whole crossover. And then we kind of go into the post idea of Operation Zero Tolerance. Now, I think if I'm correct, we're going to have to work our way up to the hunt for Charles Xavier next when it comes to our next crossover that we have to officially talk about. But anyways, guys, this is where we are going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.